All right, everybody, good afternoon. Can everybody hear me in the back there? And there are a couple extra seats on the front row if you don't have a spot. My name is Tate Westbrook, and appreciate everybody coming out today. I think maybe the snow may be a benefit for the crowd size that we've got, because if it was some beautiful, 65, 70 degree day, we'd all want to be on our boats getting ready for the spring. Thanks very much to Harrington Harbor, the Cheneys for building this amazing facility, for Brad Wells and Lauren for putting this together today. For those of you who were at the morning session, which was a presentation by Herring Bay Yacht Club about some recommendations of some excellent plays in the Middle Bay to stay, this discussion today is really about taking it to the next level. And either there was a mix of skill sets and experience in the audience in the first session, and there are again in this session. So for some, they might need some extra help planning and doing voyage planning to truly go beyond line of sight navigation, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And ideally try and expand your horizons. I grew up on Tennessee inland lakes, and so have been boating all my life, but got to the sea later. Started with small sail and power boats. That led me to a Navy ROTC scholarship at Tulane University, and I just recently retired from a 28-year career, over 100,000 sea miles under my keel, retired as a Commodore, and my wife and I have owned, my wife Ashley's here with us today, we've owned lots of power and sailboats together, and for those who are concerned that you might not have the technical background, I have a degree in rhetoric. So you do not have to be an engineer to be able to navigate. You do not have, I'm sure. Sea-tails. You got sea-tails. Well, of course, yes. I can always tell a good story with a degree in rhetoric and an MBA. So I can tell you how much it's going to cost to do your trip. But like you, even though I've got some expertise in several topics, I'm still learning and learn something new about my boat or about the bay every day. So today I want to definitely help you expand your cruising grounds. Greetings to those who are watching this on YouTube live streaming on the Harrington Harbor YouTube channel. And if you want to take notes during this, you may, but this entire series will be available on the Harrington Harbor YouTube channel. And also every one of these topics, we've only got 2 hours today, every one of the topics that we'll discuss is just covered in much greater detail on my website, trawleryachting.com. Despite the Navy biography, again, I'm still learning too. That's why we're all here. Here are the topics that we're going to cover today. And I will save some time at the end to actually do an entire voyage plan live. There were several great places that we talked about in the near kind of Middle Bay area in the morning lecture. I'd like to ask anybody who wants to at the end, just pick a destination either from this morning's brief or something within a reasonable distance, and we'll actually lay it out live at the end. And please ask questions during the presentation. We've got a lot to cover in a 2-hour session. I truly want to make this a discussion, and for any of you, whoever asks the question, there are very likely others here who may have the same question, so you'll be helping them out when you ask that question. First, I'm going to start with the fundamentals of crew resource management, and this was, the three fundamentals are leadership, communications, and decision making. This was adopted in commercial shipping and the Navy as bridge resource management, similarly in place in various formats in the medical industry, hospitals, transportation, firefighting, but it started in the aviation world. And so you'll see in especially long-range cruisers, we've got some pilots in the room right now, and they grew up living and breathing cockpit resource management, later changed to crew resource management, and again, the Navy and merchant fleet has taken it on board as bridge resource management. I bring it up here just because safety is a primary focus of, especially if you're going a long way, and these fundamentals are essential to making sure that we're all safe. And I'll go over each of these sort of briefly. There can be only one captain, whoever that is, and if you and your partner or spouse swap those roles sometimes, you've got to be crystal clear as to, hey, on this trip, I'm the captain, and I'll be, the 51% of the vote on every final decision. Clarity is key. Also, cross-training. There have been lots of mishaps out there in the personal or pleasure craft boating world in which one spouse or one partner who had all the information in their head and lifetime of boating experience, they're the ones who are incapacitated, and the other spouse or partner is in big trouble because they haven't done that cross-training. I believe strongly in pre-briefs, and it's not because I was in the Navy, it's that just about every time we get underway, there's somebody new on board. We cover safety procedures, we cover the what-ifs of man overboard, we locate the fire extinguishers, we talk about how to use them, and of course we talk about do's and don'ts of using the head. I'm sure you've all had guests on board who broke that fundamental rule. I've got hint and hope highlighted here because, again, that's very discussed a great deal in bridge resource management, cockpit resource management too. The hint and hope of one particular mishap is, wow, I don't remember this part of the runway being this dark before. Well, they were going down a taxiway and it resulted in a collision on the airfield. So hint and hope, especially between two people who've sailed together their entire lives or their entire marriage, saying something like, yeah, I think that bridge looks a little bigger than the last time. Instead, be crystal clear, because, and it's emotional for me because in the Navy, I've been part of multiple mishaps avoided because some junior sailor was the only one who noticed something didn't sound right, didn't smell right, didn't look right, and they spoke up because we had an environment that empowered that. You've got to make sure that's true with your crew. You've got to make sure that's true with your spouse or partner, that person says instead, yeah, that bridge looks a little closer than last time. Instead say, that's hinting and hoping. Instead, it's, we're too close to the bridge, back down now. And be clear about it because you're a team when you're on your vessel. When you've got other crew subordinates, and that's your kids handling lines up on the bow, or your guests it's their first time aboard, give crystal clear direction. And then especially for you and your regular crew, expect and give repeat back. Send over all lines forward. Send over all lines, in the Navy we would say, send over all lines aye. You respond in some way that you all work out, and then you report it when complete, because whoever's at the helm is busy and they want to hear from behind them, all lines clear astern, all lines clear forward. Now you know you can put the boat into gear. That it takes a little practice and some rehearsal with you and your partner or spouse and your crew, but it's essential. Again, consistent with the briefing, you discuss the plan and you solicit questions or concerns for your crew. You might need to clarify something. And I've got to highlight, we're not going to go over all these things, but no kidding, rehearsing them. We've got plenty of opportunities in the bay with my favorite, and I have lost count of how many dozens we've recovered, of floating Mylar balloons that we see in the bay. What a great opportunity to practice man overboard. And it's a low-fail mission. You don't actually have somebody in the water, but the act of getting the boat turned around, if you're a sailor, getting your sails squared away or backing the sails, there's a couple different maneuvers. We're not going to go into man overboard, but practicing getting that balloon out of the water with the boat hook is the first step of actually getting somebody on board. And then how are you going to get a limp, maybe unconscious person my size out of the water? If it's you and you alone that's going to do it. There's multiple devices for sale, or there's already the gear that's on your boat that you can use. Main sheets are great for that. A par buckle with several lines. We're not going to go deep into that, but if you haven't practiced it, the day it happens, you will deeply regret it. Similarly with firefighting, big article on the website about that Coast Guard minimums are absolutely not enough. And this photo is from a Boat US Foundation test that they did. Good article on their Boat US Foundation website, that they brought 20 volunteers, but they were all boaters. And they lit various fires and gave them the same fire bottle that was on their boat. And over 50% didn't know how to use it. Many didn't know how to pull the pin, that you have to squeeze the handle, the basics of using a fire extinguisher the day you need it if you haven't practiced and at least talked about the procedures it may hurt. Now we're going to dive into the voyage planning piece and go through that for probably the next 45 minutes or so. And you'll see these tenets play out in the voyage planning procedures today, as well as when we do it live and at the end. These are underscored again by the principles of crew resource management that you see sprinkled throughout here. We will start with the end in mind in our plot. We're going to go through the research. I'll show you how to do that. I'll show you how to plot, fly the track. I'm going to pause for a second on avoid auto routing, and then we'll get later to beware the magenta line. There are multiple navigation apps now. Navionics is the leading one. Aquamaps is coming up as a close second now. I use both. They both have an auto routing feature. The problem is that they will manage, first of all, you've got to make sure that your vessel's depth and safety depth is properly set, or the auto routing will take you across too shallow water. But worse, auto routing has yet to get good enough, even though Garmin bought Navionics and it's a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company. Their AI that runs, the artificial intelligence that runs the auto routing is not nearly as good as the GPS in your car or Google Maps. And it just like if you were driving along and Google Maps told you to turn left and get into the oncoming lane of traffic to shorten your trip by a few hundred yards, you would ignore that. That is what regularly happens with auto routing in those plotted systems that you push auto route, you tell it, I want to go from Harrington South to Cape May, New Jersey, and it'll draw you a line all the way. If you use that function as a quick planning tool, that's great. If you use it as your primary planning tool, then you've got to zoom way in, fly the track, and move and adjust every single waypoint that puts you into oncoming traffic, that ignores the rules of the road and drives you up the left side of a major high traffic area. The most common problem I see here often, and I don't know if it's people using auto routing or just trying to save themselves some time, is people going north from Herring Bay, either Harrington North or South people, and they're headed to Annapolis or other points north. The general shape of that section of the bay is a gentle left turn. And those folks always zoom right up the coast, kissing the buoys all the way up, zoom right by Thomas Point Light, and in doing so, for every single meeting situation, a head-on situation of any vessel going south, that they expect you to come right per the rules of the road, you expect them to come right, but because you are literally screaming along the left curb of traffic, it causes a challenge, vessel after vessel after vessel. Auto routing will do that to you frequently in every left curving piece of geography in a river or a bend at sea. Similarly, the auto turn function is very scary to me. That is, many of you have multifunction display chart plotters that can be slave to the same brand or a different brand of autopilot, that when you load a route and you execute that route, your boat will make the turn when it gets to the waypoint on its own. Same kind of automotive comparison. If you've got your Google Maps or Garmin GPS and you've got a self-driving car like a Tesla or something, you'd be really upset if your Tesla turned automatically onto the next road without you being in control because there might be oncoming traffic. So I highly recommend you disable that interface, and if you're starting to do your first major route planning after today's discussion, you may want to find that interface and make sure it's there so that you don't find yourself suddenly in a left or right turn that you hadn't planned just because your plotter got you to the next waypoint. Similarly, I believe strongly in using nav aids, meaning you can plan your route in the vicinity of a large buoy so that you can double check with your binoculars. But if you consult any of the, holding up a MapTech brand bundle of charts, instead of buying these very expensive, or not super expensive, but the fact that you have to buy a lot of these paper charts, they're also phasing out print on demand, and you'll no longer be able to get a chart after 2025. So the companies like MapTech that still make these, they make it easy for some boaters, and you see just any one of these pages has these magenta lines drawn across them, which are recommended, actually not even recommended routes, they're just convenient routes. Where is this? This is, actually I just happened to open it to Herring Bay, look at that. So we're right here and we've got, these magenta lines. You'll note, and I realize it's, far away, especially in the back, every one of these magenta lines takes you from a big lighted piling directly to a buoy, directly to a buoy, directly to a buoy. So don't plot buoy collision tracks. These are recommended tracks. This one says, from the course from this buoy to this buoy is 195 magnetic. Good approximation if you plot that exact, and you see this little box here, they've got a precise latitude, longitude of that buoy, and it's dead center where that buoy is. If you plot a course and use that buoy's location as a waypoint, you are going to collide with a 20,000 pound steel object that sticks down in the water about 30 feet with a huge chain and weight on the bottom of it. So please do not plot buoy collision tracks. Similarly, if you're plotting a route that you might think that half a dozen other boats doing the same transit of Long Island Sound or whatever have the same chart book, because MapTech is the leader, all the other boats might be plotting the same magenta lines. Take your waypoint and offset it a couple hundred yards, maybe 300 yards away from the buoy that you want to come close enough that it's a visual double check that your route is correct, close enough to be able to read the number. Yep, number on the buoy says number 15. That's what the chart reads. I'm in the right spot, but do not plot the buoy as your collision point. Also plot bailout options. We'll talk about that when we get to the plotting, which is alternatives. Go ahead and pick your anchorages in advance and mark them. And we'll talk about anchoring a little bit briefly. We could teach a 3-hour class on anchoring techniques. I'll get into it briefly with just one slide today, but you've got to practice. And even if you think, well, I don't like to anchor. The last time I anchored, I dragged anchor. I'm gonna help you fix that. But anchoring is the #1 emergency response in the event of a casualty to your propulsion system, whether it's sails or engine. The safest place to be is quickly get out of traffic, drift out of traffic, and anchor in an appropriate spot, just as an emergency anchorage to stay where you are. Then you can fight the fire, fix the casualty, stop the flooding, call for the tow. You'll be fixed in one spot. And if you are not comfortable with anchoring, you're going to resist that #1 super safety backup tool. Understand and account for commercial traffic patterns. We'll get to where they are and how to read them and understand what they're doing. We'll talk about fuel management. We'll talk about tides, currents, and weather, and just the idea that you need to pad the schedule. The worst thing in any voyage plan is a schedule you've got to meet. It's a guest on board who has to make a flight time or something like that. You've got to think about alternatives if people have got transportation connection. Many of us still have jobs and you've got to get back to work on time. Plan the alternatives, and if it's too tight, shorten your destination or pick another spot. Again, brief the plan, whatever it is, and then once we get into actually executing the plan, you got to follow the plan, but don't hesitate to deviate when needed. But then you've got to tell the rest of the crew, here's what we just changed. We're coming in at a different time. It's not a port side moor. I just talked to the harbor master. We're going to shift everything to the starboard side. Let everybody be ready in advance to minimize your risk. Starting with the end in mind, and what I'm going to do is basically go over a plan as if all of us were getting underway on our vessels within the next couple of days, and we want to go to Cape May, New Jersey. Either Cape May or slightly off the screen is Wildwood, New Jersey. For those who haven't been there, very different world. Cape May is this beautiful, quaint, sweet restaurants and beautiful little streets, Victorian town from back when that was a great vacation destination. My teenagers love Wildwood. Snooki is there somewhere. It's, Jersey Shore all day long with, hot dogs and a boardwalk. And in fact, the last time My wife and I visited Cape May. The East Coast monster truck show was in town, and it was on Wildwood Beach. So pick your poison, but both great options of a destination. You can stay in Cape May and briefly visit Wildwood, or if Wildwood is your scene, you can stay at the Wildwood Marina and then briefly visit Cape May and the winery, etc. So I'm starting with the end in mind, assuming I've never been there before. I'm showing you a paper chart, but the same information is available on your digital chart. You just got to dig a little deeper. All the same data is there, but the way the digital electronic navigation charts, or ENCs, are made is all the extra data is in layers. You've got to turn some of those layers on or off to see them, or in other cases, zoom in to see them, or in other cases, click on an object and query it. The beauty of a paper chart, sad that they're going away in my opinion, is that everything you need, in theory, is right there on the two-dimensional piece of paper. At my initial scan of Cape May, I noticed a few things that needed a little bit more research. There's a notice here that says Cape May Ferry. So I want to find out what's the story with the passenger ferry, because my plan is to come through the Cape May Canal into Cape May Harbor to one of these marinas, or go a little bit further up to Wildwood Marina. I noticed that I'm checking the clearances on all these bridge. Horizontal clearance 55 feet, horizontal clearance 50, vertical clearance 4 feet. My vessel is a little taller than that. Most of ours are. So I want to check on that. What's the story there? Of note, the New Jersey Intercoastal Waterway starts here. That's this faint magenta line drawn sloppily and drunkenly down the channel. We'll get to why you don't trust the magenta line later, but there's an indication. Another one, fixed bridge with a 4-foot vertical clearance, but that's to get back in this creek. No marinas back there. And then I also note that, hey, look, there's 3 QR codes to 3 marinas, and it looks like there's 1, 2, 3 marinas named. I now need to go look at, hey, which one has enough depth? Do I need fuel? I want to check services. Where do I go for that? My first stop is the U.S. Coast Pilot. Now, it shows the cover of a book here. I don't have the Coast Pilot lined up here on my ready references. I recently threw away my stack of different sets of Coast Pilots because the ones I had were probably 6 years old and were very out of date. These are United States products produced by NOAA, and they now are online. They still print the books, and they're going to continue to do so. And if you're in a situation where you're underway and you don't have a cell phone signal, or you drop your phone over the water, if I'm on a long-range passage and a true big journey, Great Loop or something like that, I'm going to have the latest Coast Pilot book on board. However, as long as you've got connectivity, you can go to their website, and the beauty of the website is it is literally updated every single day. What you find there are, and you literally just, because it's on the web, you just Control F, you just search for the word Cape May, and it lights up all the paragraphs, and you learn about the canal and its procedures, if any. You learn about lots about the currents and tidal situation, warnings about the Coast Guard base that's inside. But in that, I found lots of information in the Coast Pilot about Cape May Loose Ferry. It reminds me, basically don't impede the passage when they're docking, when they're pulling in and out of their little pier here. Docking's prohibited, meaning our boat cannot dock at the Cape May Ferry dock. They're always on channel 13 and 16, like the rest of all commercial traffic. Their vessels are AIS equipped, so you'll see them coming. If you want to look up their schedule, it's right here. I did notice a couple of warnings, and I've got those in yellow here. Strong currents may be encountered in the jetties on this approach, and it's a reminder that because red on right when returning from sea, or red right returning, there's 2 directions here. That's seaward, and this is seaward. Therefore, when you enter at this point, your red nav aids are on the right, but by the time you get up into Cape May Harbor, the red nav aids are on the left, because that's returning from sea from the Atlantic side. So if in the confluence of right when you arrive in the harbor, you got confused and you hadn't looked that up or hadn't noticed it on your chart, you might go on the wrong side of a buoy and run aground.
Excuse me, are the Coast Pilots normally available at places like West? Or do you have
Yes.
to order them from?
Yes, the question was, is the Coast Pilot available at places like West Marine? Like any decent chandlery will have them. They've got a pretty decent section of navigational guides at West Marine and other local chandlers in town, but you definitely can order them. They've got them on Amazon, or you can order them directly from the NOAA website. And there are other regions. This happens to be Region 3, which is ours, and you may be able to read on the coast that covers Sandy Hook, New Jersey, which is right outside New York City, all the way to Cape Henry, including the Chesapeake. So that's our region for pretty reasonable cruising ranges. If you're heading south, Book 4 is Cape Henry all the way to Key West, Florida. And if you're heading north, you need Region 2's book, which is Sandy Hook to Cape Cod. Sir?
Quick question. When you see strong currents maybe encountered in the jetties,
Right.
what would your action plan be?
Excellent question. You were the perfect straight man. The question was, when you see a warning about strong currents, what's your action plan? Certainly, knowing that they're there, I've got a fast trawler, so I've got some horsepower available, but lower horsepower vessels are really going to need to pay attention. So you may actually want to time your arrival for tides and current, or the tidal-based currents. I'll show you how to find those. You can certainly do them on any number of the electronic apps, and whether it's Navionics or Aquamaps or any of the other really popular and effectively run ones, have a live tide current picture right there, and you can see the arrows growing and shrinking and then changing direction. However, if you're planning your trip, you want to know, if you're really concerned, and we'll find out how bad the current is, but if it's crazy, if it's like Hell Gate coming through New York, you want to time your arrival when you're there, not at the 4.5 knot ebb, but for more or less slack current. And we'll get to that shortly, and I'll show you where to find that. Just a reminder that in the last discussion, one of the folks briefing said they went to a place and they planned their arrival to arrive at slack tide, but were shocked at how much current there is. Slack tide and slack current are completely different, and depending on how much water a mass of water is behind it, it could be completely slack tide on the sensor at Cape May, and there could still be a 2-knot current running through the canal. Yes, sir, question?
I was going to ask you, is there a way in some of these applications where you can actually fast forward to the time that you're there so you can better time
Yes,
your arrival?
absolutely. The question was, do some of these apps let you fast forward? Absolutely, almost all of them, and we'll talk about it also in weather. With Windy, with Aquamaps, with Navionics, you can slide a time-based slider several days forward and back until you see that fat blue current arrow turn down tiny and just turn to blue in the other direction. That's an approximate time. I want to time my arrival and back up. When do I need to leave the marina here in order to get there when that little current arrow is tiny? Well, great question. And we'll get into how to do that in a few more slides. And then where will I stay is another question. We've got those marinas I mentioned there. And so, which marina supports depth, fuel services, etc. So I switched to a different digital tool, which is the Waterway Guide. Many of you are probably familiar with their book. Here's the 2021 Chesapeake Bay Waterway Guide. The great thing about, again, I like having one on the boat. We also have one, it's in fact in my wife's bedside table, because we enjoy kind of, doing a couple little trip plans. Hey, where are we going next weekend? Let's start planning. It's got all the stuff that you need, little zoom in maps, information about each marina, points of interest, etc. But just like the NOAA website is for up-to-date information on the Coast Pilot, the Waterway Guide's website, with a slight fee for an annual membership, is truly up-to-date information. And you'll see, if you hover on these that are little exclamation points, those are navigation warnings. Now, the caution there is that, like many of these websites, and there's a great benefit to it, but you also have to take some of them with a grain of salt. Some of the information, like those yellow exclamation points, are crowdsourced information. And so when I clicked on this one that's just right opposite the Cape May Ferry Cape May Lewis ferry, someone had entered severe shoaling on the south side of the channel. Now, was that somebody who really had gotten outside of the channel and they're reporting that, sure enough, outside the channel it gets shallow? Or was there really some shoaling? And it wouldn't surprise me, a lot of power in those ferries. They might have stirred up some sand, and that guy may have found, who reported that, a shallow spot. When you click on this one, it talks specifically about a lighting outage, and it was reported by the Coast Guard region there, and it said that it was an update that the light that was out has been repaired. I'm not going to teach the Waterway Guide app to you, but you can see there's a ton of information, and I happen to only have, see this pull down menu, marinas selected, so it's turning on the marinas. There's several other pull down menus available, anchorages, points of interest, that sort of thing that are available, bridges and locks, navigation alerts, and fuel. So you can do all of your planning, and there's a co-branding that's happened in the past couple of years between Aquamaps and Waterway Guide, so the chart that is underneath all of those layers of information is run by Aquamaps, and it's very precise. Similarly, if you use the Aquamaps app, there is a switch that you can enable or hide. As you can see from a navigation standpoint, I wouldn't want to be running a route using Aquamaps with all of these other little symbols floating. So you can turn off the Waterway Guide switch on your Aquamaps app, but while you're voyage planning, it's very handy. In this case, I've just clicked on one of these little boat symbols for the marina, and it gives me the information about South Jersey Marina. You click again on full listing and you get depth, approach information, phone numbers, what VHF channel, et cetera, et cetera. And of note, another one of those yellow triangles, it's hidden by that box, was about active dredging that's going on right now in Cape May, and it was a current report from U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So now we've decided, and this is just the exit of that same channel, and you see the Cape May Lewis ferry is mentioned there. So just for the moment, just for simplicity, this is the beginning of planning a route that starts right at the mouth of the entrance to the Cape May Canal. Now, normally, especially since the canal is so clear and distinct, this could truly be the start of your route. It might be kind of confusing to be maneuvering your way through a completely well lighted and well buoyed inner harbor and have your, in our case, we have a Ray Marine brand multifunction display chart plotter, and the alarm is excruciating, and you can't turn down its volume when it's your waypoint has been reached alarm. You may have a similar experience. So while you're in the middle of the harbor and you're totally following red and green buoys, and you can see this straight as an arrow canal, completely, I don't need waypoints to tell me to turn. Now, it is nice that if I plotted waypoints all the way to Wildwood, as you'll see later I did, that does give me a very precise total distance, which I can then use to calculate how much fuel I'm going to need. But for avoiding alarms, you either disable that sound while you're in the inner areas with lots of little short legs, or you could just start planning your route right here, and as soon as you're inside the Cape May Canal, you're now in a purely visual environment. For pilots, you're switching from IFR to VFR, and you can find your way to the marina. So here's just an example, just the beginning of the route. I'm using Navionics here. That's the very first route, that solid purple dot. That's waypoint 0. Here's my first leg, and you literally, if you hadn't used Navionics, you click here, you're in manual route mode. You click here, you drag your line, and I dropped it right in the center of the channel, and I did it in the vicinity of, but not on top of, red buoy number 2. I then dragged my line up way off the screen to the next turn in the channel, clicked it again, and that set waypoint 2. We'll get to that shortly and actually do it live together. Please note that, excuse me, I've used Navionics for this and several other of the slides here. I've used it for years, but I don't exclusively, I'm not endorsing it specifically. I also use Aquamaps, as previously mentioned. A couple of features I really like from Aquamaps They have U.S. Army Corps of Engineers overlays, more on that later, that show you their latest pre-dredging information that shows unusually shallow water, and they only do it for high traffic areas. We'll talk about Naps Narrows and Tillman Island, and I'll show you that overlay. And if you've got a boat with draft like ours, 4 feet 11, you'll never go through Naps Narrows until they fix that. It also has an active route function, and for those of you sailboaters, if you don't already use Aquamaps, I encourage you to consider it. One of my absolute favorite features for either slow cruising trawlers or sailboats is the Aquamaps feature. It's got some AI machine learning in there that accounts for the currents live and gives you course to steer adjustments so that you stay on track and it saves you time. So if you've got a route here and it's, display, once you've actually hit run and you're running the route, it tells you what your next course is. It accounts for the currents in real time, and even though this leg looks like 275 true or something, even though this leg coming out is 275, it'll tell you steer 278 to account for the current. You can obviously figure that out on your own plotter, watching your course over ground point somewhere to the left of this waypoint. You start adjusting course to the right 1 or 2 or 3 degrees at a time until your course over ground vector is pointing right at your target. However, Aquamaps does it for you in real time because it knows what the currents are. It's getting
your speed.
right. Well, yeah, you've got GPS in your phone or your iPad, and so it knows at what speed that iPad is cruising over ground. It's beautiful. Same with Navionics. Any of these, and I brought this is one of my. I will plot on 3 objects. I plot on Navionics or Aquamaps and put it on an iPad because I've got the a Navionics account that I pay whatever it is a year, small amount. It's on every one of my devices that I loaded on. So I've got Navionics on my phone, Navionics on the iPad. My chart plotter on the boat is my Ray Marine. It's part of the boat. And then I am sort of a geek and I will paper plot my route as well. In case we get a lightning strike or something like that and all electronics are gone, I can get home. That might be overkill in the days of a 26 satellite GPS constellation, but I like triple redundancy. Double redundancy is probably good enough unless you're crossing oceans. So another view, this is on the paper chart, and I've run this route a few times, and so I've got alternatives. I've enhanced the paper chart with red lines just here on the slide in PowerPoint to show you, if you can't quite see, my scraggly handwriting that says avoid crab pots, my 288 degrees magnetic and the arrow that's that way. I have another route up, which is 320 magnetic written heading out of Cape May departure there. And my note to self here during the thing, a great route, but if you're in full-blown crab season and if you've got a twin screw vessel, I absolutely do not recommend that route. And you'll see on this paper chart, because it's part of one of these MapTech chart kits, there's a magenta line that I did not quite follow because this 322 magnetic magenta line that's printed on paper takes me right to a buoy. No, thank you. I'd like to avoid that. So I plotted it both in the chart plotter and on paper, 2 degrees offset. Sir?
Do you typically chart magnetic or true?
I do not have a gyro. Some of you may have gyros on your boat. If so, I'm available for crew. It's a very expensive object to have a gyroscope that truly displays true on the boat. And the other reason is you can make your chart plotter and your Navionics app. Actually, Navionics won't do it. Aquamaps will. You can make them display in true. The problem is that unless you have enough money to have a gyro on board, so the Fleming owner, it's my dream boat in the future, the Cape Horn owner might have that ability to plot everything in true. If you don't, then your backup, and I'm a huge believer in the compass as a triple check, if I'm cruising along and my chart plotter says I'm making 288 magnetic over ground, and I look at my big compass there in front of the helm, and as long as it's close, there's variation in the boat itself. Deviation in the boat itself. There's variation created by the magnetic lines of flux of the Earth. So it's going to be close. I can do the calculations to get it down to where it'll match, but as long as it's within a couple of degrees of 288, I know I'm okay. If I'm dramatically off, unless I've got a toolbox sitting right next to my compass, something is wrong with GPS. My antenna has snapped off, a bird just sat on it, and I'm getting bad data. And so I always plot magnetic to make sure that my chart plotter, my paper plot, and my actual compass all agree as I'm kind of scanning my gauges while I'm cruising along. And you know, as mentioned, I'm not trying to sell everybody on paper charts, and in fact, NOAA's vision is they're going to stop printing them. So if any of you have admired a beautiful framed chart of the Chesapeake Bay in somebody's house, you have two more years to get them using NOAA's print on demand. Oh, I love that. I saw that at the restaurant. I want to buy one of those, or I want to buy, Camden, Maine, or something like that, where our oldest daughter was born. You better order it now, because 2 years from now in 2025, you will no longer be able to order these using the NOAA print on demand motion. It is sad, but what you'll see, and again, I'm conditioned because I grew up using paper charts, but here you see the difference between an ENC, electronic navigation chart. This happens to be Navionics, but you'll find a similar lack of data at first glance. On the left and on the right are the same light. This is just after that second waypoint that was off the screen, just a little bit north and west of the exit of Cape May Canal. This is the Miamal Shoal light, and on the paper chart, I'll step over here, you see all the information I might want. The name of the light, it's a magenta ray, which means it's lighted. It's got a black dot in the middle, which means it's a major light and it's fixed in the ground as opposed to an open dot with a magenta dot that's a buoy. That one's still lighted, but it could move, so there's no solid black dot. The light characteristic is it's occulting every 4 seconds. And occulting is kind of the opposite of a long flashing light. It's basically an occulting light is winking at you. Every 4 seconds it's on, and then it briefly goes dark. On for 4 seconds, briefly goes dark. Very distinct light, a lot of light going out there. How much light? It's visible for 10 nautical miles. How big is the object? It's 59 feet tall. At night or in conditions of restricted visibility, it's got a sensor on the tower that detects, it's literally sending out little light beams, and if it gets reflected back off of fog, the light knows that there's reduced visibility, and a horn will sound. And it also has a radar beacon. This is an acronym within an acronym. Radar, radio detection and ranging. Beacon, they smushed them together, and this is a Raycon. The reason I bring these up, they aren't common anymore. They used to be more common, but they certainly are still out there. And in contrast, on the ENC, all you see is the name, Miamal Shoal Light, a little tower symbol, which is handy. That's better than a dot. You see the magenta ray, which means it's lighted. The little sound waves tell you it's got a sound. But to get anything else, you've got to click on the light, hit the question mark. This pulls up the information in that area. I want to click on Miamal Shoal Light, and it will tell me all the same light characteristics several clicks later. It also has a colored sector, just like Thomas Point Light near us. This backside, if you approach the light from the dangerous shallows, and again, think these are designed for larger vessels than ours, but if you're a ship approaching from the backside and you're outside the channel, you're gonna see red flashing 4 seconds and briefly winking because, and if you can see here in the photo, there's a red shield of glass here. So somebody who took this photo is basically pointing their camera at this angle. The red is on the right of the screen, and then this clear window shows everywhere else. As long as you're in the channel, you'll see white. The Raycon is exciting because if you're approaching it at a great distance, about every 8 to 10 sweeps of your radar, this tower takes your radar information and shouts it back to you, pulsed with 2 dashes. You know it's 2 dashes because it tells you dash, dash. You see it dash, dash. And all of them, I'm not expecting anybody here to know Morse code, but if you do, 2 dashes is M or Mike. They're always intuitive. This is the Miamal shoal. It starts with an M. It screams M on your screen. And so if you're approaching this, the reason I point this out is less that you're going to use a Raycon for navigation. It's you're using it for confirmation. You're approaching it on your chart. You know there's a Raycon there. If you hadn't done this sort of research, study the route and take notes, you might be alarmed to see what looks like 2 gigantic barges steaming straight towards you. And oh my God, no matter what course I change, they're pointing straight at me because it's reflected radar energy and it comes back. We're the own ship, our own boat is here in the middle. There's that little tiny blip is where the actual tower is, and it displays behind it. And as we go by and steam by in the channel, that Raycon, these 2 dashes will continue to clock around always in the same direction, facing away from us. So I point that out that if you see a Raycon, and it may not be Mike, it may be Alpha, short, long, it may be some other letter, maybe Sierra, 3 dots, it may be Oscar, 3 long dashes, you'll see it on the screen, you're like, that's a Raycon. I don't have to avoid it. I'm not about to collide with a giant barge. So this is the full section of just Cape May. And again, I am plotting on behalf of my teenagers, so we're going to go to the Wildwood Marina. So the big solid purple is where I started my clicking. And again, this is a very well buoyed track, and so I would be okay with just following it without a live route, but this tells me exactly how many extra miles I've got to steam. Gives me a great way to do time calculations. So I literally zoomed way in on Navionics and clicked every single turn, kept my clicks in the center of the channel. If I cut the corner too much, I slid the dot. You can go back and grab a waypoint, slide it with your mouse or trackball. If you've got a Navionics account, you can build these at home and then take the chip out of your Raymarine or Garmin. When you plug it in, as I know all of you do, and periodically update your charts on your chip at home, you regularly do that, right? At least once or twice a season, you pull the chip out of your chart plotter and take it home and upload the latest free chart updates so that you're not navigating on an old chart. When you do that, you can also load as many routes as you want into that chip, and you can pull them up on your chart plotter, and the entire route will be there. So we just basically did all the way here. Instead of starting at the exit of the canal, it's 25 minor turns just to get to there. Now we're taking off. You see the last one was 25. Just at the outside of the jetty is my taking off point. In this case, the last time I did this transit was like November. That was the paper chart. But if we're going tomorrow, same deal. It's snowing outside. There's no significant crab pot concern. So I didn't go a little bit longer. I went ahead and almost took that recommended route of 320. That intercepts the track, zooming on up, and I kept it, the track deviates slightly, heads on up, a couple of major lights, and in ENC's electronic navigational charts, these are the sector lights that we talked about, and that's Miamal Shoal up there. The yellow is in fact not yellow. That's just the international display for the white light in a sector. So that's the red sector. So it makes sense if you're a ship cruising up here and you're too far out of the track, you're going to see red. Oh my God, I'm going to collide. Or if you're too far left as you approach this shoal, you're going to see red. Same all the way up with sector lights. And then cruising further to the top of, we're just now almost, the rest of the Delaware Bay is down here. We're now at waypoint 31. Click, click, click. You'll see here is that I deliberately crossed the shipping channel because there's a lot of traffic headed up to Philadelphia. I wanted to be on this side because I knew I had to make a left turn. Now I've got to watch out for traffic coming out, small vessels like my size, but any big ship that's going to come out, is gonna stay in the channel and is gonna swing wide and stay well clear of me. Also noted here is it's actually just off the screen is the nuclear power plant. It's got some dotted lines around it, which is a area to avoid. They've got police boats out there. So again, the Chesapeake and Delaware Canal, if any of you have been through that, it's just a tunnel of water. It's 450 feet wide. Two big ships can pass each other easily. You and a ship can pass easily. You could certainly go down it. It's visual navigation. There's only a couple of actual red or green markers. And just like the Cape May Canal, red on right when returning from sea applies here to about the halfway point. When you're coming from the Chesapeake, you're coming from sea. And so when you're coming this way, red's on the right, the colors switch, and then red's on the top side, or when you're coming in, you start and red's on your right, but then the colors flip.
Does it say where it flips on the chart?
There is no indicator in the waterway guide. There is a yellow triangle that warns you, and that's just hey, watch out, the colors switch. But there is no indication on the chart. Now, granted, I was flying the route really closely and noticed, oh wait, there's a red buoy, it's on the wrong side. No, it's not on the wrong side. I was past the midpoint. Yes, sir, your question.
Ships in the channel have pilots on board?
They do. Pilotage is mandatory. They're Maryland pilots, and almost all these are coming, if you're coming this way, they're coming out of Baltimore, coming in from sea, and you'll see the pilot pickup point is just south of the entrance here. There's a big wide spot there in the river where they'll pick them up, but they do have pilots on board, and if you do have to talk to the ship, it'll be the pilot that's going to answer you on Channel 13. I noticed, again, as I was flying the route, there's a couple of marinas here. Summit North, great marina. I have been there before, and great restaurant there. Also, Schaefer's Village Marina. I've zoomed in on this section of the chart. That is not a feature of Navionics. I zoomed in, screenshotted that, and just pasted it here on PowerPoint. But I did that to just show right when you get here at Chesapeake City, there is, you can see the words Anchorage Basin. That is this Anchorage Basin here. It's a free anchorage. It's about 12 feet, 9 in some areas, so a great anchorage spot. Right here is the city dock. That's a free dock with like 6 or 7 slips. No amenities, no power, anything like that, but it is a free dock. And then there's the Schaefer's Village Marina right across the way. They've got fuel across their way and a decent restaurant there as well. Yes, sir.
Are they good places to hold out for favorable tides?
Absolutely no. Great question. We're going to get to the tide current planning. Perfect spot is, in fact, you'll see later. You're the best straight man ever. I'll send you the check soon. I'll Venmo that to you. By planning, figured out that in order to avoid some hairy currents on the nose as I was heading south when we're going to Cape May, I opted to burn an hour at the restaurant or at anchor or tied up at the free dock so that when I actually got out into the bay, I saved about a half a knot of current on the nose. But great spot there. And that's a great little bailout and a solid marina right there. If you do stay overnight, I recommend you ask them to put you on the inside. They frequently will put transients right here on the outside, and all night long commercial traffic is pushing you a little bit.
And when we were there were really strong currents.
Oh yeah, we were there. Yeah, when we stopped there with helped a friend deliver their new boat, and I'd say 2 to 2.5 knot, 2 1/4. I didn't pull up that chart, or that current map, but probably a 2 to 2.5 knot peak in both directions as you get max ebb and max flood. And then coming down the rest of the bay, the exit of the C&D Canal is at the top right there. And again, this road and this little cluster is Chesapeake City, where we just talked about. You come down and start into the Elk River, and I've plotted just crazy sources of bailout spots, marinas and anchorages in the upper Chesapeake. You'll notice there were almost none of them. There's a couple on the Delaware Bay side, but it's pretty exposed. The Delaware Bay is kind of notorious for a really tough chop, especially when current is opposing the wind, much like we experience here with a outgoing ebb current here in the middle bay with a south wind, that can get really steep, choppy little waves. The Delaware Bay, it almost happens every day, and so you've got to kind of plan for it. Yes, ma'am?
How far is it across the Delaware Bay? Is it 40 miles?
Ooh, I don't know. We can do that when we can measure that on Navionics shortly. I don't know, the total, yeah, that widest spot is, it's hard to see the other side. I bet it's at least 25 miles, I think, at its widest spot. But and even the mouth, the mouth of the Delaware Bay is, open directly on these, well, it's just off the corner, but basically it's open directly to sea. And so if you get any kind of eastern swell, it's packing in, certainly at this widest point. And Navionics has got a handy little, this is the measure distance where you click that and click here, but just, anytime you've got big open water like this or a Great Lake, the fetch of sustained wind in any direction is really gonna crank up the seas. So we're coming down here again, I'm not gonna name all these, but just tons of options for anchorages and bailouts. And then I've got the bailouts in yellow, what I consider something that you wouldn't wanna stay overnight, but if you had some casualty or you smelled something funny or you see an engine starting to overheat, and just pull over, drop the hook properly, and wait it out right there while you're figuring out your plan before you get into a deeper, more exposed spot at which there is no bailout and your high temp alarm turns into a shredded impeller and then you're down one engine. Or in my case, I only have one, down the engine. Also noted here, I've added the big red dotted line when I was flying through this and looking at this in the Coast Pilot. It warned of the procedures for steaming in the vicinity of Aberdeen Proving Ground. This is Aberdeen Proving Ground where they do lots of Army live fire testing. These yellow buoys mark the extreme limits. Those are not navigational. There's anytime you see a yellow buoy, it's called a special purpose buoy. And so as long as you're outside there, then you're safe from danger of live fire. The last time I was in this upper area a year ago, I think, Ashley and I, 2 years ago, went up to Havre de Grace. I realize I'm not from Maryland and I'm pronouncing that properly as opposed to how they pronounce it here. We went up there and in this vicinity were a couple of the safety boats with the red flashing Grimes light and a big Bravo flag flying. That's the solid red flag with the V tail. And they waited for us to pass, and then 2 other Navy special combatant craft boats were there and were blazing away with their 50 cal machine guns at targets in the water and on the beach. So it's kind of fun to go by.
They waited for us to pass.
They did. They waited for us to pass. We were well clear, and they were firing at targets ashore. But it's just always kind of, I don't get to hear 50 cals often these days. So, coming further down the bay, just left that last section on the last slide. Again, some more marinas here. Fairleigh Creek was mentioned in this morning's lecture as a great spot. And of note, again, this is not part of Navionics. I did the zoom on it. Actually, this zoom is off Aquamaps and dropped it in there because it's a nice image here. The approach to Fairleigh Creek is you come in, these are 2 green buoys. You're coming from sea, so green's on your left. And then right here, you take a sharp turn to make sure, it's pretty shallow, 3.9 as you're approaching this beach, and some anchorages in here, and then there's a marina in here as well. Apparently, I have not been in there. Raise your hand if you've been into Fairleigh Creek. It's apparently kind of cool in the summertime that people sit here on the beach, like right out here in the shallow water with Olympic, score signs. And if you execute a beautiful sharp turn and don't run aground, you get an 8.9 from the admiring crowd. Deb Foss, who was the Commodore of the Herring Bay Yacht Club, and she briefed this morning. She has a Grand Banks 50 or 49, and hard to put that wheel over and get that turned around, but she takes it into Fairleigh Creek regularly and gets high 8s and 9s every time. So again, cruising down, you see Rock Hall pointed. The pointer's just off the screen. The approach from Rock Hall, you have to go well past it to enter, and we'll see now. Here's the approach to Rock Hall. You can see this very shallow spit that comes down the chart, and you have to dip down to go in here. Lots and lots of marinas in there, including a Free City dock. Pretty shallow water at that dock. It's about 4 feet, so we can't get in there. But lots of marinas. Still slightly shallow in Rock Hall. I know a lot of people love Rock Hall. Anybody been to Rock Hall before? All I hear about Rock Hall is the ice cream, which reminds me of like the private aviation world when pilots just want to get, an hour or two of flying and they take their small plane up, they land at some small local airport. All little airports have got a little cafe with a hamburger place. And so it's the $100 hamburger. And so seriously, it's the same. It's like if you go to Rock Hall and the only thing you can tell me is how great the ice cream is, then you are buying $100 ice cream. So God bless you. But we've been there a couple times, don't get me wrong, but I still don't quite understand what the thrill about Rock Hall is. Anyway, we'll get into all this stuff here, but you kind of know your way around since we all live here. Plenty of choices, and we went over those. And the bottom line is kind of the comparison of this morning's brief was all about, hey, here's some places you might want to go. I want to show you how you can do it yourself without having to have a buddy boat or somebody who's been there before. You'll be able to read the chart and you will answer all your own questions to guarantee that you're safe to go into the place. Now we're getting down almost on the home stretch. A couple more waypoints getting us right past Thomas Point Light. Again, this is DNC or electronic navigation ENC notation. These are the light sectors of Thomas Point Light. So if you've been underway at night, as long as you're out here, you only see the white light. Again, the European notation shows it as yellow, but it's just a white light. But if you're, coming into West River or South River at night, you're going to briefly see as you pass through these sectors, you're going to see it flash red, reminding you that if you approach at that angle, you're approaching really shallow water. And same deal if you're coming down the bay and you've strayed so far as you're headed south that you're over here and you're seeing red, then something's wrong. Whoops, sorry. And now the final home stretch, we're here in Herring Bay and ready to go. And I stopped it here. We're in Herring South, but many of you are up here north. Now I note here too, this is another feature of always be careful on digital charts, periodically zoom in and zoom out, zoom in and zoom out. The little red dots there have my attention. What are they? Well, if you zoom in on them, on Navionics, same on Aquamaps, you'll find a whole bunch of, all these little green pluses are things that crowdsource users of Navionics, you can do it, I could make a point right now and drop it on somewhere. They drop on there trying to be helpful, I appreciate that. Well, here's a screenshot of my own dated Raymarine chart plotter. Right here is buoy 83 alpha. It's buried right next to this little cluster of symbols. This is buoy 83 alpha. At this zoom level on Navionics, you don't see the label. I wish we had a paper chart. But inside this circle are multiple people who've plotted pound nets. This is a picture of the pound net taken by my wife, awesome photographer, of this big one, the pound net number 1. Or if you're not from the Chesapeake, it's a weir, it's a fishing weir, these huge stakes. And please note the water depth here, 26, 25. These poles are still 10 to 12 feet out of the water. These are 40, 50 foot long poles that have been driven into the bottom to hold this net structure. They're required to be lighted at night. And God bless them, somewhere on here is that, which is, that's a seagull. That is one of those construction zone blinking yellow lights that's been like basically duct taped to the pole. Thank you, my fellow mariner, but after a while that battery dies, and shockingly they haven't replaced the battery. And then a couple of construction cones, they have reflectors. The good news is round objects are incredibly good reflectors of radar energy. So if you're using your radar like you should be every day to get used to what it looks like, so you know how to tune it properly, you'll see a pretty good cluster of reflections. Whoever plotted these two is pretty close because pound net, again, this is my label on my chart plotter, pound net number 1 is very, very close to green buoy 83 alpha. It basically marks the edge of that pound net. But when I plotted, you can see here's the buoy, when I plotted these three, I had my boat right up next to the poles and hit the little mark, create a waypoint on my, on my own plotter, went to all three corners, so I completely trust that position. Whoever plotted these two, it's at least behind the buoy. This guy was completely wrong. It is definitely not in front of the buoy. And then same deal, you've got this scattering of plots. I encourage all of you to drive really close to these, put a waypoint in your chart plotter, save it as a route, and then turn the display for that route on. In my chart plotter and most brands, you can pick any number of waypoints. They don't all have to be an X or a dot. I chose the skull and crossbones as a reminder. Don't go anywhere near those. Yes, sir.
I occasionally have this exact problem in Herring Bay, but when you plotted this after the fact, how do you plan for it before the fact?
Right. I do this because even though it's our own backyard and I kind of know where they are, I've plotted that. That is the big problem with pound nets, and that I didn't have it on the screen here. If I had zoomed out a little bigger, just to the right on the chart, it has the words and it says fish trap area. Not particularly enlightening because the dotted line around that fish trap area is ginormous. If you go to the Maryland Department of Natural Resources website to look for all of the authorized permits for pound nets, the bay is filled with them. Some of them are color-coded as to which ones are being actively fished or not, because they've renewed their license for the year, but they don't remove the poles even when they're not actively fishing them. As I said earlier, they are not good at all about maintaining their lighting. Your only savior, frankly, because and those plots on the Maryland DNR site, I don't know if they're XML language, which is the Google Maps language, are they really precise, or did someone get a plot up for an approximate region? The only navigationally reliable ones are the ones where you see a tiny little dotted box and it actually says fish weir or fish trap, but those are very rare in the Chesapeake. Most of them are like this and they're uncharted.
Just
Question first.
what is a fish where fish, what are these? Who puts them there? And
Yeah, the guys buy permits to place them there, and then they set, this is taken almost looking down the base of the arrow. It's kind of an arrow-shaped structure, and the long axis of the pound net is aligned astride the prevailing currents. And so mainly they're big rockfish catchers. And so the fish just come along in the currents. They bounce along that flat wall of the net and end up in the box in the end. And they come by once or twice a day with a heavyweight crane and pull that
are
in.
they eating these fish?
Oh yeah, definitely, absolutely. I mean, I think they're selling.
So the fish, they're catching the fish.
They're definitely catching the fish, and then you see often, there's one in the picture there, you see often other fishermen nearby because sometimes there's some bycatch or something dies in there, and it really is a great attractor for other fish as well.
And
Yep.
they don't typically show up except the high magnifications on a lot of.
Right, but I mean, truly, I've looked at it on Garmin, I've looked at it on Raymarine, I've looked at it on Aquamaps, and I've looked at it on Navionics, the top four, and these two are not plotted. The only thing is a huge area which says fish trap area, meaning permits are authorized in that depth. So you had a question?
Do they move around from year to year?
No, I've not seen these two move. I would think the expense of relocating your poles after you got a permit would be outrageous. I can't imagine they would.
Do you find that they show up on radar?
They do. As I said, anything that's round is especially solid and round, like a round wooden pole, is a pretty good radar reflector. And then clusters of poles are really good because your radar energy bounces around and then comes back to you. So they are definitely distinct on radar. So I point those out. I mean, this is less to do with voyage planning, but I think you kind of hit the question here, which is how do you make sure? This is where voyage planning in execution mode turns into hypervigilant watch standing, and there's always somebody looking forward. The radar's always on. You learn how to use the radar, and if you're not good at it, you buy the leading book. You'll see this later in my resources, Radar for Mariners by David Birch, which, no kidding, teaches you how to properly adjust your radar, drop the filters down so you can see everything you need to see. So, and then finally, so we basically finished our route we planned it in reverse. And the reason we plan in reverse is because we know our home water's the best. We need the most information about the destination. And once you've loaded your route in your chart plotter or in Navionics or Aquamaps, there's a button on each of those that says load and reverse, or reverse and start. So even though we built it backwards, with that one button, the whole thing switches around. And when you say start, it will give you the bearing and range to this one. So ignore it briefly, or wait until you're about here to turn on your route, unless you want to run a couple more in here because you don't want to come out of the little jetties here and accept the aim point and just head straight for it. Another reason why you don't want to have your autopilot slaved to your track. But once you get here, you hit start, and that becomes number 1 instead of number 76. And so you need also know how much fuel you're going to need. Now, the top 2 bars is the same route, this entire route back here. I started back here in Wildwood, New Jersey, all the way up. It's behind the screen, across the C&D Canal. You see all those million little dots up there, down the bay, 76, and then the end point is right here. All of that is loaded, and I just cut and pasted just this total distance summary. I've gone into my boat settings. Our boat is 4 feet 10 and a half, 4 feet 11, I rounded up to 5 feet. I've got 2 options. It's a fast trawler. My apologies to trawler purists. I know that's an oxymoron. I've got a slow, right at displacement speed mode, and I've got a fast cruise. As you can see here, I prefer these days, especially with fuel prices the way they are. We do a lot of slow cruising with our single screw Cummins 660 horsepower QSM 11. My penalty is almost 5 times as much the fuel burn for double the speed. When diesel was a lot less expensive, we went fast, but not anymore. Yes.
So what boat is this?
A Legacy 42 with a QSM 11. And so again, fast trawler, that's an oxymoron. But so I've got 2 options. It's the same distance. I can either go 8 knots, and it'll take me 16 hours and burn 61 gallons of fuel, or I can pay a 100-gallon penalty and get there in 1 day, in 8 hours. So it depends on what your schedule is. I mean, so that's I haven't refueled in a while. What's the latest fuel price at Harrington South?
$4.45.
And so, okay, even if I buy, with the member discount, it's $4.35. So that's a $435 penalty, and that's one way. So, am I willing? Depends on the schedule, whatever. It's our crazy lifestyle that we love, and it's cheaper than an airplane ticket and blah, blah, blah. We might consider, if you really needed to do it, or you had a tight timeline, you only had a long weekend, something like that, you might consider going fast.
And you don't want to miss Snooki.
Yeah, what's that? And you don't want to miss Snooki, or if you really want to go to the Monster Truck Show, and if you take 2 days, you're going to get there. So clearly, I've got either an incredibly long day, and this time of year, we don't quite have 16 hours of sunlight, so we could do an incredibly long day at 8 knots and not stop for lunch. Or we could do it in 1 day, or we do a 2-day trip of 8 hours each, which is a very reasonable cruise. You could stop at the C&D Canal, stay in that Anchorage Basin, eat at that restaurant, stay at the free dock, and you've got 2 days to get there. Now, how do I figure out the fuel burn rate? I built my own little fuel table because this is the Cummins panel on my helm. One of the many screens that it has available is instantaneous fuel consumption rate. And so I plotted, and if you don't have that, we'll get to how to do it, but I plotted for every speed change, extra knot, how many gallons per hour am I running, how many RPM, and how many knots am I getting. So those are my 2 sweet spots, and I plotted them on a curve, and there's 2 kind of flat spots. I'm most efficient at 16, you start to get 17, 18, and 19, and it gets really outrageous for only a couple more knots. So those are the 2 sweet spots. If you don't have one of these that's automatically being produced by your engine's display, many of them, if you've got a digital display of any kind, there's probably somewhere in the menu that you can see fuel burn rate. If you don't, then you can install a flow scan meter. Here's an example of some super glass cockpit thing that Caterpillar offers. Faintly hard to read here is fuel rate, 40 liters per hour. You switch that to imperial so that we can speak gallons. If you don't have a fuel meter, that's okay. You can look up, manufacturers have them, just Google fuel burn rate for Yanmar YSL3, all right? In this case, I Googled fuel burn curve Cummins QSM11. So a standard stock engine under a normal load. There's going to be some slight differences with how dirty my bottom is, et cetera, but this is reliable enough for fuel planning. And so here's how many gallons per hour you're supposed to actually burn. You could then use that to assess how fast you're going at those RPM, because everybody's got a tachometer that shows your RPM, and then you can plug in a reasonable amount of fuel consumption per hour to get your own burn estimates. So now, do we have enough time? So I do want to get there before dark. Sir, question?
On your previous slide, do you know on Navionics or Aquamaps, is it at all possible to do your route planning with variable speeds, or do you just have to do like 3 routes?
No. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
For example, if I'm not mistaken, you can't do 16 knots in the C&D Canal. You certainly can't do it in the Cape May Canal.
Correct.
So for
Correct.
those sections, you're not doing 16 knots, you're doing 5 or 6 knots.
Correct.
Which is maybe not a big deal off an 8-knot cruise, but
Right.
certainly a hell of a big deal off a 16-knot cruise.
Correct.
Would you just have to break that up into, say, 3 different routes? Or do you know of any way in Navionics to do a variable speed?
I am not sure. In this particular module, this is the one that I use that you only plug those in to derive the fuel burn calculation. But the true arrival time, I'm not sure. I've never tried in Navionics to do, you may be able to select a leg and change the speed for it, but I don't think so.
Okay.
Aquamaps may be able to. Again, I have not tried that. This is certainly a full trip average. And great comment about the C&D Canal. There is no speed restriction there, but there is a caution in the rules that are in the Coast Pilot about damaging weight to shore structures, which is true anywhere we boat, and slow for small traffic. So I have gone through there at full plane until I encounter a smaller vessel and then slow down. But there's not a true speed restriction. The one thing you cannot do is you cannot go through under sail. And nothing against sailors, it's they don't want to have some variable wind shift or something affect. I mean, this is a commercial traffic lane, so they don't want to have that happen. So now, just do I have enough time? This is again out of Navionics. I just clicked on this little fuel gauge looking tide chart in the Cape May Harbor. I've zoomed in on that. I clicked the sun and moon button on the left, and it displayed that. So, and this was for tomorrow. So 5:46 p.m. is sunset, but you've got a little more time. Now I like to get in at light, but you've got about 30 more minutes for civil twilight, which is tons of light. Even at nautical twilight, which is as late as I would want to arrive, you've got a full hour after the published sunset where you've got enough light to be able to see the dock, make your approach safely, not actually need a spotlight. If you arrive any later than 6:44, then you're definitely going to need a spotlight. What you're going to get off Navionics is sunset. You can go into Date and Time or several other websites. It's slightly different during every part of the year, but right now it's exactly 6:13 and 6:44. So I've got plenty of time with my 8-hour trip to get there on time. That then determines when I should leave. But what about, some gentleman asked earlier about planning for currents, tidal currents and all that. So, and also want to plan for weather. This is the Windy app, and I've cut and pasted several different screens here to show you my comparison. The slider at the bottom lets me slide forward and aft for approximate time of arrival. I'm calculating with an 8 or a 16-hour plan. I still want to get there in the daytime. 4 p.m. arrival gives me a couple of hours, 2.5 really, till nautical twilight, and a good hour and 45 minutes arrival time within Cape May. So that's plenty of cush for safety. On the 26th at 4 p.m., and again, this is if we're leaving, first thing tomorrow, an 8-hour trip, we will encounter, and I slid it a few different times, a little bit earlier in the day, it's even less waves, but the worst it gets on the 26th is a 1 foot C with a period of 3 seconds. Now it's really rapid period, but it's only 1 foot, and it's flowing towards the south. Reminder that seas and currents go in the direction of their name, so it's flowing to the south as opposed to a south wind is coming from the south. But 1 day later, on the 27th, we're at 3 foot seas from flowing to the east and at a same period of 3 seconds. So you're getting pounded, and we haven't even talked about wind yet. So let's go to the windy, and off the screen on the windy app, if you haven't used it, there's this whole menu of, you can display waves, you can display swell, wind, rain, snow, etc. And when it's running, all of these little tiny freckles are moving. So it's completely intuitive to see that is a south flowing wave action. So here's the wind look. Again, here's the color scale. So we're still in this kind of pale green, which is okay. On Sunday the 26th at 4 p.m., the worst it's going to be is 11 knots from the southwest. Same day, or next day, an hour later, sorry, that's slightly off the screen, 18 knots from the east. I choose to go fast, at least there. Now, in a few days when we come back from our trip, we'll reassess the weather, but to me, that's a no-go. To take a full 2 days to get there and arrive Monday afternoon, we're gonna get hammered and be exhausted and covered in salt coming down the Chesapeake Bay. There's another way to look this up too for long-range graphic planning. If you don't want to use the Windy app or not comfortable with the slider, you go to the NOAA Tides and Currents website, you click on the state of interest, that zooms into a map, and you click on any one of these lollipops for data. I clicked on the little blue one, and the legend over here says blue for currents. These are tides. And I clicked on the current. This little current data popped up, but that's right now, that's today. So you click on the more data button, and then you get to plug in a day. You want it 48 hours wide. And this looks like tide charts that you've seen, but this is current speed and you see the top of the graph labeled flood and ebb. Which way does that flow? Mean flood direction to the north, so that's coming in. All floods come in from sea, ebbs flow out to sea. So worst case, you're dealing with almost 2 knots ebb and just over 1.5 knot flood. And since that flood is coming in, that's on your nose. So I'm thinking if I want to arrive at Wildwood at 4 p.m., the previous weather analysis said, we're going to go fast on this trip. We're going to take that 100-gallon penalty. We're going in 8 knots to get there in time for the monster truck show so that we don't miss it and so we don't get pounded. When do I have to leave? If I leave at 7 and if I take a long lunch, then I'm departing at about maybe 1 from the dock after lunch, and I've got 1 knot of current on the nose. If I got underway and I didn't do lunch, now I've got a full 1.5 knots. And over the same time that I'm coming down the bay, in time, the force of current on my nose is very limited. In fact, the last maybe 30 to 45 minutes, I'm getting a push help as I approach the Cape May axis. What I found in the Coast Pilot on that current issue is, it said when you've got a flood tide running through Cape May is when those currents are the worst, especially when it's opposed with a westerly wind. In this case, we're going to have a southwest wind, but the ebb current is the less significant. We're going to arrive with maybe 1/2 knot, so that's acceptable, minimal turbulence. Question back.
My racing experience tells me that current never behaves in such a delightfully smooth or slack water at the peak of the fall.
Well, I mean, slack is in the middle, and you can see in the chart, at least based on that buoy's data, this is all, future predictions based on historical data, there is no pause in the current flow. Basically, here's your slack period. It's slowing way down, it's completely stopping, and it's going in the opposite direction. But your max within these 2 bars is 1/2 knot. So that's your slack period. And same with a tide. I mean, a tide has a stopping point at max high and max low. But as I mentioned earlier, if we compared the tide chart at the entrance of Cape May to the very close by current data, high tide would not be max flood and dead low would not be max ebb, because you've got the mass of the entire Delaware Bay being pulled by the moon after you reach low tide in Cape May. All that weight still has to go out to sea. So they were, if someone in the previous lecture said, it's like, yeah, I got to so-and-so fuel dock at slack water. He calculated slack tide, and he probably still had half the Eastern Bay blasting through Kent Narrows. Yes?
So last Saturday, early morning, the tide here, the water was very, very low. There was heavy winds the day before. Is that the wind blowing the water out of the bay, or is that?
Probably so. Especially, yeah. I mean, we'd have to check the meteorological data, but that is very common. The bay is really very, very shallow for its size, as is the Delaware Bay. You know, think of it like trying to walk around your house with a cookie sheet filled with water. Just the slightest motion, in this case a sustained 50-knot wind, is going to pack water on one side of that cookie sheet, and you will have dramatically different tides.
So all these, sources for tide, current, etc., would that show up on these in real time?
They do not account for wind adjusted. These are only astronomical tide and current data, so it's counting on the very reliable presence of the sun and the moon and how they pull the water as the earth turns underneath that water.
So where would you go to find the information like last Saturday?
I don't know that there is a really good meteorological to tide predictor. Like, I don't think you're going to see that. I mean, you're going to see the wind in windy, and you'll say, wow, we've got a heavy duty, strong westerly wind. We may have a lot less water in Herring Bay, but I don't think predictively there is a connection between those, because it doesn't always play out that way. I mean, it's got to be a lot of wind, but much more importantly, it's got to be sustained in the same direction for half a day or longer to get that effect. Sir?
How useful would it be then to overlay the tidal currents like you have here with the tide?
We could do that. I didn't build the slide like that. It'd be two separate, an upper and a lower graph that I could
I realize that
compare those.
The good they're superimposable, but they're not the same.
Sure. But the key is, do not make your current assumptions based on a tide chart. You need to go to the current. Now, we can probably go back to any one of these Navionics zoom views and look for, let me find a zoomed in current. Yeah, like here, all these C's are actual live current sensors, and then all the T's are tides. You click on them and their instant data is displayed. Once you're actually running, either in Navionics or Aquamaps or on your Garmin or Raymarine or whatever brand you have, if you are connected via a phone signal that's woven into your system, or if you've got a one that is satellite XM weather capable in your Garmin offers that, then you will see actual tide arrows in the direction that they're flowing, and their size is growing and fading based upon their strength, and they're getting live data from these that's going into the web and displaying on your screen. But that's one of the beauties of, I don't have that on my Raymarine, which is why I also have Aquamaps or Navionics running whenever I'm cruising. All right, so back to where we were. So we figured out weather, we figured out sunlight, we figured out currents. So we are ready to go. We're going to do an 8-hour trip. We're going fast. We're burning fuel. It's the day of departure. It's tomorrow morning. Let's check our weather. Let's brief the plan. And you can either check it live on one of your apps. You can get on the NOAA website, or you can turn on the radio. You've got to wait a while for your region to come through. on the channels 1 through 6 on our VHF radio or the weather channels. As I mentioned earlier, follow your own track, but you have no right to that line. If there's a vessel coming and he's head on, you're required by the rules of the road to come right, so is he, and then you come back to your track. You know, if it's my turn point right now, well, it's a crossing situation, the vessel's to starboard, he's the stand-on vessel, I'm the giveaway, I'm gonna wait until he passes my bow and then I'm gonna turn. Or maybe I'll turn early to be even more in compliance, but blindly turning on time, blindly staying on your track is a very dangerous thing, but it happens. You know, it's easy to kind of get groupthink that's based on your own plan. You trust your plan, I'm gonna stick to it. There's a risk there, and that's another kind of crew resource management thing. It's like, honey, why don't we just turn a little early and cut the corner? No, by God, that's waypoint 39. It's like, well, but there's 4 other vessels coming this way. If we turn now, we'll avoid them all. Thank you, Ash. You know, that'll help me out. Beware the magenta line. We've got a slide coming up on that, and be ready to anchor. Now, I added, while I was having lunch in the little Gedunk office next door, we were talking about Tillman Island in the last thing. Who was here in the first lecture? We talked about Tillman Island. Again, I draw 411, and I will never go to Tillman Island. Not only have I run aground there once, which is just embarrassing. We get fired in the Navy if you touch bottom ever. But unlike, and this is a just quick snapshot of Aquamaps with the Army Corps of Engineers recent survey data turned on. All the little heat map stuff. We'll get to that in a second. So use the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers overlays. However, on Aquamaps and a few others, you can select all Corps of Engineers data that's ever been in existence. Don't. You can select 3 years, you can select within 1.5 years, or you can select the one that's called months. I recommend no more than 1.5 years. Maybe toggle 3 and go back, but the one that's, you know, what if that survey data was 10 years old? All that sand has moved several times. I moved a lot of sand the day that I ran aground. It changes. Check your gauges, and that's both on your plotter, but also your physical gauges. If something looks wrong, respond to that gauge, slow down, pull over, stop the engines, anchor, figure out what's wrong, respond to alarms. If you hear something beeping or some weird noise, don't say, God, I wonder what that is. I've never heard that before. Talk about hint and hope. My God, I've got, you know, waypoint 37 up ahead. I can't miss that, or I've got to be on time. That's why we pad our plan. And then inspect the engine room regularly. When I'm underway on a passage, I do it the first hour a couple of times. I've got a pair of mouse ears right there at the door. Open up the engine room, step down inside, do a quick visual inspection, just looking for leaks, smells, smoke, etc. Hop back out. Once you've been going for a few hours, you can drop it to 2 hours or 3. If you're on a 4-hour watch cycle, then once per watch, right when you come on or right when you come off watch, you go check it out. This is the beware the magenta line thing. And so here are 3 different views on, I tried to get them exactly at the right angle so they look about right. Obviously paper chart, and this is just right down here is Cape May Harbor. So this is just the start of the New Jersey Intercoastal Waterway. I've oriented it to where the chart looks about right. This is Aquamaps, and strangely Aquamaps has colored the magenta line black. I don't know why, because it's been a magenta line for a long time. And Navionics, again, when I tilted it, it got a little fuzzy, but the dotted line is the magenta line that you see. The magenta line is printed in the Intercoastal Waterway, up the entire Atlantic Intercoastal Waterway, starting at mile 0 at Norfolk and going down south. It's printed on all paper charts and others for the Gulf Coast Intercoastal Waterway and this brief little section of 112 miles from New York Harbor through the New Jersey Intercoastal Waterway that pops out at Cape May. It's the Intercoastal Waterway is maintained by the U.S. Army. I'm a naval officer, so go Navy, beat Army. The Army uses statute miles, so that may be a little strange in your calculations if you're trying to think about time and distance. Don't be tricked. Granted, they're close, 5,280 feet instead of 6,000 feet, but still, We do everything else in nautical miles in our plotters, on the scale at the bottom of the chart, in knots in our speed. The Army plots the mile line. So basically 110 miles to the top of the twisty, turny New Jersey Intercoastal Waterway. It is notoriously shallow. If your vessel is 4 feet or greater in draft, do not go further north than Wildwood. That is not personal opinion. I haven't gone that far in a deep draft vessel. I've done it once all the way up to Seabright in a shallower draft boat and still touched bottom a few times. All of the multiple inlets that are up and down the entire Jersey coast change the sand around. They don't dredge it that often. It's incredibly low commercial value. So you can get to Wildwood Marina right up there, but go no further. And then same deal, you can see how it is only there like a little hint. You know, it's not follow, you must wait until that little jig in the line to turn, or those couple of, it's drawn like a drunken sailor drew it. I'm qualified to know what that looks like. But it is just an indication, and they do it so that it's like, I'm on the Intercoastal and I want to stay on the Intercoastal because I'm going all the way to New York City because I've got a 3-foot draft vessel. When I get to this junction, what do I do? This looks like plenty good water. The magenta line is merely there to tell you, if you want to stay on the Intercoastal and the Intercoastal signage, stay on this route. That's all it's there for. So many, many collisions and near misses happen every single day in the Intercoastal by amateur mariners who blindly follow the purple line. By God, I'm not getting off this line. This is what Navionics told me to do. It's like, well, okay. The Admiralty Court will find you at fault. So the other warning here was the be ready to anchor. And I could, again, spend hours teaching this, but I often talk to plenty of my dock mates and friends at Harrington South, and many of them have never anchored, or they anchored once and they dragged anchor. They didn't know why, so they stopped. Even if in your mind it's like, well, I really don't like anchoring either because I don't trust my anchor, or I don't trust myself or my procedures, because it is your number one most reliable backup in the event of some casualty to any aspect of the boat that you need to stop and safely wait. Or the part that one of our most pleasurable things of boating is going for a weekend, finding some quiet, peaceful anchorage in some beautiful place and anchoring and staying the whole weekend and putting our kayaks in the water and just exploring. There's nothing like waking up at a quiet anchorage where it's just you and it's calm and the birds are landing. It's awesome. So knowing how to anchor and do it safely is key. The number one biggest anchoring mistake is not putting out enough scope. It's not how heavy your anchor is. The anchor doesn't put you in a place. It's the weight of the chain that's on the bottom and the tension as the boat gets pulled by wind or waves that gently lifts some of that weight off the bottom, but never moves the anchor, because the anchor is there to hold the chain on the bottom, and the length of scope is there to keep the angle of the anchor stock such that any tension on it just digs the plow further and further into the bottom. And if your scope is too short, now instead of pulling that anchor totally horizontally, jamming the blade into the bottom, you're beginning to pull the stock up a little bit, and now instead of digging in, it's starting to dig, or like a hoe in your garden, it's starting to pull stuff out. So here are the procedures, and these are minimums, and of note, I borrowed this from USA, or Boat US Foundation. It was designed with kind of the smaller boater in mind who might have an anchor with 10 or 15 feet of chain and all the rest nylon rode. Now, nylon rode is awesome because it's a shock absorber. Some of you, who here has all chain rode? I do not. I wish I did. You've got big, badass boats. I don't. Now, the one thing that you don't get with all chain, where you get all chain rode, you get, and I've written over here, you can get away with a little bit lower ratio because you've got so much weight on the bottom that even a heavy wind is just going to lift a little bit off the bottom long before your anchor even starts to move. But you get shock loading and a lot of noise up in the forward berth. So a lot of people with all chain roads use a nylon snubber. That's a hook that holds onto the chain, and the final couple of feet of tension is taken by the nylon. But for those of us, I've got a mixed road, I've got like 50 feet of chain, and then all the rest is plat nylon. So I make sure all my chain is on the bottom regardless of depth, and then I pay out enough ratio. I like 6 to 1 because it's easy to remember. There's 6 feet in a fathom. Adult my size, your arm to arm length is 6 feet. I want to mark my chain so that as it's in line as it's coming out, I can see, 25 and 50 and 75 feet. That is long on my list of stuff. So I haven't done that yet. Lots of ways to do that. Lots of articles on different techniques. It's a great idea. Some people have a chain counter as the anchor's going out. You see a little numbers flying. My boat doesn't have that. That'd be awesome. So here's your procedure. I'll go over this quickly, and then we'll take questions and we'll move on. Again, brief the plan. Get your anchor ready. If you're going to power down, you got to turn the windlass on. Be sure you stop the boat, and you want to have slight sternway, like you're gently walking backwards, because you want the chain to lay out in front of you as you're gently coming back. Then, just bump it astern and then back to neutral, maybe bump it again. You give the command, let go of the anchor. All these commands are in quotes. Somebody on the bow, or if you're powering down with the windlass, you can push the button at the helm. Fully release the brake so that it flies out of there unimpeded. Wait till the scope is 5 to 1 minimum. And I like 6 to 1. And then if you've got a manual brake like mine does, you set the brake, or you just stop powering down if you're doing it electrically, and briefly bump your boat astern. Depending on the mass of your boat and regardless of size, you are in the thousands of tons of inertia. And if you just bump it astern enough that you can see the bubbles going by, all that mass is going astern, you're gonna pull hard because you've got enough scope out, you're gonna pull hard and it's never gonna lift off. If you really heavily power astern and you've only got 5 to 1 out, you might actually start to lift the entire chain off the bottom and rip it free. So it's just a bump astern. You just want a little energy to dig that anchor in, and after that, it's not going anywhere. So you only briefly engage the stern thrust. You eyeball the anchor rode from whichever helm position you're using. You want good firm tension. If you see the line or chain go super tight and then fall to the deck, and super tight and fall to the deck, that means your anchor is skipping along the bottom. You might be on a rock bottom or something like that, and you haven't held yet. But you get a big, and you hear the rope kind of cracking and popping a little bit, your anchor's set, you don't have to do anything else. Set your anchor watch. Lots of apps available for anchor watching. You can either set your current position and add manually how many feet of line you think you've got out, or the minute the anchor goes in the bottom, then you push the button and the anchor's there, and it remembers, because there's GPS in your phone, where the anchor is, and you always have a little plot of where you are swinging around the anchor. You set your swing circle, and if the boat goes out of that, or if your phone goes out of that circle, the alarm goes off. We frequently play music from my phone over Bluetooth, and if I set it too close and I'm at the bow, and then I go back to the cockpit, the alarm goes off and stops my heart. Or if music's playing on the stereo and I forget and I get in the kayak and paddle about 20 feet away from the boat, then the stereo goes wah, 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 and I have to bring my phone and leave it back. So, but set your thing. And then when you're getting underway, it's easier, reverse. Again, what are we doing? We're about to get underway. Turn the breaker back on. If you've turned your windlass off, you release tension on the road with the throttle. So briefly engage forward thrust. You've got someone up there that you've described in detail how to do this, and then you start heaving around on the anchor rode. You can do that manually, and I encourage all of us who've got electric windlasses, if you haven't actually practiced putting a winch handle into the hex-shaped hole in the top and cranking an anchor, and if you think, well, God, I don't even have a winch handle on board, go to West Marine and buy a winch handle and put it in your anchor locker. They have, those of you who are not sailors, there's a great little kind of rubbery, soft nylon bucket, wall-mounted thing just for holding an anchor or a winch handle. You put that down inside of there so that one day, if your windlass goes bad, which happened to us, you quickly learn how to crank it. It's not fun, and doing that, if you've never practiced, is no fun. No. So you've got the manual ones, and Wilcox Crittenden that have a big hand crank. Those are awesome. Certainly fewer things to break because there's no motor. But Have your bow crew instructed to constantly point, because you can't quite see the line sometimes as it's under the bow, where is the anchor rod pointing? So if you've come forward on your engine too long and your person on the bow is pointing like this, then it's okay. You just don't want to come forward anymore. Don't back down. You're all right. There's some slack of line under the water. You're going to be heaving around on the windlass and sucking that slack in. And then they're pointing, or if it's, pointing over here, well, you can put the wheel hard right, and the next time you bump forward, you'll kick the stern around a little bit and line it up a little bit more for your bow chocks. You want to bring it on. I mean, your anchor windlass motor is strong, but my boat weighs 19 tons. It cannot pull the boat against a heavy wind or a major current. You've got to help it with the engine so that you save the life of your motor, as well as reduce tension with, now there's people working in the vicinity of a line that's under heavy tension. Nylon line snapback is very dangerous, so you want to keep that tension light. They're reporting to you verbally. Had a picture earlier of the EarTech, nicknamed the marriage savers. EarTech phones, if anybody's on the bow, it's like, okay, light strain, light strain. If you've got the EarTechs on and your batteries are charged and all that, you don't even have to do the pointing. You can say, medium strain, 3 o'clock. And that's looking straight down at the bow as if there was a clock. And so 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, light strain. You want light strain, 12 o'clock, light strain. You do not want, 10 o'clock, heavy strain. Bump the engine forward if you hear that. Helms and bumps forward as needed. The words anchors away when the anchor leaves the bottom. The person at the bow can see that. They can see, not so much that the water's clear enough here, but they can kind of see the release and feel the release and tension. Anchors away. Now that you know that the boat is actually drifting, and you've got to start thinking about navigation and collision avoidance. Anchors in sight in the Chesapeake, that's this far below the water. Elsewhere you might see it coming up. And then the report that's really key, anchor's free, there's nothing hanging on it, or anchor's fouled. Now, dirty and a little pluff mud off the bottom is not fouled. That's your crew's job up forward. Anchor's free, and you'll see them. Hopefully you've got a raw water wash down hose up forward and you're blasting all that off while it's still over the side. Anchor's free. They're spraying it off and they bring it up and they put it all the way in the anchor chocks and report anchor's housed, free to maneuver. That's the crystal clear. It's like, that if the anchor's housed, you're free to maneuver. But what if somebody on the bow's got one more thing they wanted to do? That's your key report. Your job as the helmsman is maintain the boat position until you get that report. And once you're good to go, you can get underway and then start your trip.
As you weigh anchor with a rode chain combination, you got the rope on the windlass.
Right.
And then as you want to transfer it to the gypsy gear, as the chain comes up, how's the best way to do that without losing the finger?
You should be able to. Most open wildcats, the question was, how do you transfer without risking life and limb and danger to fingers if you are heaving around with your warping capstan? You've obviously got a windlass that has got a warping capstan on top and a wildcat or gypsy head teethed wheel on the bottom. Your gypsy head is designed, unless it's very unusual, specifically designed, like meaning you've got the wrong gypsy head. Your gypsy head is designed for both. It's got like an open V just outside of the place for the link, and you should be running your nylon line and it will, the way the thimble is spliced, it should transition without more than a clunk from nylon right to chain and into your locker. You should never, that warping capstan, for those of you, I've got that on my boat, the warping capstan it looks like a big sailboat winch with smooth metal sides on top of your winch. That is designed for pier side work. If in a really heavy wind or something, you're able to get a line over and you've got, your helm, your rudder turned hard away from the pier and you're gently thrusting against some spring line to try and get you in, but there's still too much offsetting wind. You can take that line to power by wrapping it around that gypsy head, the capstan that's on the top, the capstan that's above the gypsy head. In order to do that, you must remove your chain from the teeth of the wildcat. Now, some really nice windlasses have the ability to disengage. There's a lever, or one brand has a knob that you can disengage the Wildcat gear and still run the capstan separately. But the key is, if you're going to use the capstan, and I've had one for years and I've never needed to warp, but that warping method is pulling the boat to a pier using that capstan fed through one of your forward bow line chocks, take it to power with the chain pulled out of the Wildcat and set aside or held back with, you know, bungee cord or line or something. Then when you push the windlass up button, you are now just warping the boat to the dock. But I would try it next time with just line in the teeth, and you'll find, other than maybe a little clunk as that thimble comes around and goes down into your hawse pipe, it should happen very smoothly.
Just for a comment, for anybody who has a thin keel spade rudder sailboat, it's helpful to have about a 20-pound weight that you can run down your anchor road about 15 feet.
Oh yeah,
And that's a good shock absorber, plus
Yep.
if you're into an opposed wind and current.
you won't trip over your own line.
You won't. Yeah.
No, that's great. The comment for our viewers on YouTube was that, you know, if you've got a combination nylon and chain rode, sending a small weight down, it's called a kellet, where you send it down on basically a little ring or a little car, and you run it down the line maybe 10 or 15 feet. It creates a great shock absorber of weight for wave action and bouncing, and for fin keel sailboats, as our friend here suggested, it prevents, if the boat spins around, it won't trip on its own anchor line in a rapidly changing current or wind. So this is the zoom view, or it's you know, stepping out. This is Knapp's Narrows. Now, sorry, I've turned it on its side, but we were talking about it in the last lecture, so while I was having lunch, I just took some screenshots off of the Aquamaps app on my phone, emailed them to myself, and stuck them in here. So all the extra stuff in the corners is what you get on the Aquamaps app in phone mode. So I rotated Knapp's Narrows, this is Knapp's Narrows, the cut through nearby Tillman Island. Imagine it 90 degrees that way because it's an east to west cut. You can see the red pointer of where north actually is in that little tiny compass rose. This is without the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers overlay switch turned on, and this is with it turned on. And I've got in the settings, I have show me U.S. Army Corps of Engineers surveys that are no older than 1.5 years. So there's a months, 1.5 years, 3 years, or infinite setting. 3 years is a little old. Infinite, certainly I would never want to rely on that. So this is the approach from the west, coming through Knapp's Narrows and heading out. The charted depth, consistently on the chart, it's supposed to be maintained at a controlled depth of 5.6 feet. This is soundings in feet, and then 5.9, and then way out there is 9.1 on the approach. In reality, and let's zoom in on this section where Tate ran aground a few years ago, you've got some confusion potentially. You've got a black pile marker. Back in the day before the Ayala converted all to green and blue, or green and red, we had a few green markers that were also black was the option. So there's your extreme, but if you consider the channel here that's supposed to be charted at 5.6, and again, all charted depths are at mean lower low water. The average of the lowest of the lows of the entire year. There's only 1 or 2 days per year that you'll ever see lower than what's charted. So that's the worst case. Similarly, all bridge heights are posted at mean high water, the average of all the highest highs of the tides of the year. So worst case, it's supposed to be 5.6 feet, but in reality, based on their survey, right here in the middle of the channel, you've got 6.3, but right here you've got a 3.6. Tate Westbrook ran around right about here. Right here in the channel, you've got 3.4. Then it starts to get deep. So somebody at the previous thing, it's like, oh yeah, just stay south of that red. I don't know. I mean, the wild thing is the actual depth shows you should hug the red buoy so close you could almost trade paint. And if you actually ignore the red and go on the right side of it, based on 1.5 year old survey data, the sands have moved. This is not particularly reliable, but it's far more current than that. That was, you look in the corner of the chart, when was that surveyed? That is old data. So that is why I say if your boat is greater than 3 feet draft, you should never go through naps. You might be lucky. And
That you just wait and follow one of the crabmen and
Yeah.
they know exactly where they're going.
Well, everybody keeps referencing the crabbers. The beauty of the Chesapeake Bay Dead Rise is that it was designed for the shallow Chesapeake Bay. They draw about 2 feet 2 inches. And so if you draw more than 2 feet 2, don't follow the crabber. It's not, and same with, there was a discussion about, hey, right out here in Herring Bay, can I cut across the bar? The crabbers do. It's like, let's put him on the hard next to your boat and see what his underwater profile. He was designed to prevent groundings. And like my boat, he's got a single screw, he's got a keel that fully protects his prop, and like my boat, a huge bronze shoe underneath the prop that connects the rudder to the keel. Even if I run aground, I just bump and keep going. Twin screw vessels don't have that luxury. All right, so we finished the route. I want to briefly talk about equipment configuration, and I've talked way too long. I'm 5 minutes to go, and I haven't done a live demo. So if we can stay an extra 10 minutes, everybody's free to go. I do want to do a quick live demo.
You could do the live demo and then come back to these slides.
We're not time restricted. You can have.
Okay, all right, okay. I don't want to crush your brains here, but I do want to talk about two things. Safety depth, 13 and 16, DSC and radar reflectors. Really, these are kind of, this is in order of you have to have down to you probably should have them. First with safety depth, let's go to what's intuitive and what's not. This is a screenshot of the same spot. We used the same section earlier. This is in Navionics with the safety depth setting, which is the setting that every single one of you have on all of your chart plotters. You have, if you use Navionics, Aquamaps, any other, you have to tell it how to display the chart data to be most useful to you. If your vessel is anywhere near mine's 411, if yours is 4, you can go in and set safety depth at, depending on the app, 6 feet or 12 feet. In the case of Navionics, when you set safety depth at 12, everything better than 12 is white. In between 6 and 12 feet is light blue. I know I can go over anything that's light blue, but I want to pay attention, and anything 6 feet or less is dark blue. If you don't set the settings, you won't intuitively, you'll have to search. It's like, okay, am I safe? Yep, 9, 12, 21, 20, okay. Now I know at a glance, because I've set my visual display up to serve me, I am totally safe on this route because I don't see any dark blue. You see on the paper chart, I do it myself, and every one of these magenta marks, magenta so it shows up in red light. If it was red pen, it wouldn't. Magenta marks is every area that's 6 feet or less. So that if I'm using a paper chart, I know, hey, as I'm coming around here, I got to be careful because there's some shallows in that little spot right there. Back to the previous one, 13 and 16, always. Emphasis on and. Per the rules, we are all supposed to make passing and collision avoidance arrangements with other vessels on channel 13. It is limited to 1 watt low power, so you're only talking within a range of a few miles. You're not hailing on 16, you are making passing arrangements. And if you are in an area with a government-controlled vessel traffic service, like the C&D Canal, like the approaches to New York City, New York Harbor, other heavy-duty commercial areas, those commercial vessels are required by law to be on a different VTS, Vessel Traffic Service channel, and channel 13. 16 is not a priority to them because the emergencies are covered by the government guys watching with tons of radars, watching every ship moving. So they're always on 13. Therefore, we should always be on 13. I don't think anybody here has a radio that does not have a dual button, where when you hit dual, you dial it over to 13, and the secondary receiver that's in your radio is constantly listening to 16 at the same time. As soon as you hit the key on 13, you're talking on 13, or almost every radio today has got a button that says 16, so it's an immediate jump to 16 in case you got to talk to somebody about an emergency. Frequently, even out here, If you call a merchant ship to make some sort of passing arrangement, he may not answer you on 16. That's because he's on 13 and so should you. The other is digital selective calling, the #1 most valuable electronics improvement in the past 20 years, I'd say, that and AIS is, and again, if you've got a radio that's younger than about 25 years, then you have one. It's this red button right here, which is a flip cover that you have to lift, press and hold that button, whoops, for 3 seconds. And if you do that, you have just sent a digital cry for help. If you are too busy on your boat, fighting the fire, tending to the bleeding patient, stopping the flooding, all you have to do is press and hold that button until you hear a beep. Depending on the radio, it's 2 to 3 seconds. However, if you look at your radio screen and it says MMSI check, no MMSI, that's in a menu called the DSC menu, or you can faintly see there's latitude, longitude displayed in the screen. If you've got a radio that says all zeros, like half the radios on my dock do, or if you've got a radio that says no position, a lot of people are like, oh, that's okay, I don't navigate by latitude, longitude. I don't plot my own position. The radio is not there as a navigation tool. That is telling you that you do not have GPS plugged into the back of your radio, so that when you press and hold that red button, when it sends the call for help, it sends your position to the gnat's butt, down to 4 digits after the decimal in minutes, and the Coast Guard will be coming. The other part is, if it says no MMSI, that means that you have not registered that radio to your personal information, your boat, etc. If you're a Boat US member, Boat US will do this for free, and if not, it's a $25 fee. You then enter the information from your radio, you enter into the MMSI system, that's Master Maritime Safety Index, I think, or safety identifier. It's basically, it's the serial number of your boat for safety purposes. Once you register, it's got your name, address, but much more importantly, it's got a detailed description of your vessel. I've got a fast trawler, white superstructure, medium blue hull with a flying bridge is in my description, so that after you've pushed the button and it sends your precise GPS signal as they're flying in to get you, they know what to look for. And if those two are not in place right now, when you go to your boat next, please check it. Find the digital selective calling menu, DSC, see if there's an MMSI number entered, and if you have not personally updated the information that's associated with that 6-digit number or 7-digit number when you bought the boat, that means it's still got the previous owner's information. You can update your own information for free. Just Google update MMSI number data. You'll find the Coast Guard website and plug that in. And if you have no position, that's far more troubling to me. If they're looking for the right described boat with the wrong owner name, you'll still get help really fast. But if you have no position, there's no GPS, and almost all of our boats are NMEA network, you just pull one of those lines off and run it to the back, and all the GPS signals that are bouncing around your other electronics, one more goes into the back of your radio. Any question on that? And then I'll stop. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just ask you to repeat that? So we bought a new radio.
Yep.
So that we could program our MMSI.
Mm-hmm.
The old one is registered to the boat,
Right.
but it's registered in terms of his contacts, it's registered to like a dead guy.
Right.
So if we happen to hit that, it would still come looking for our boat, but they would call his.
There might be some notifications, and they're slow. They're not immediately calling simultaneous. They're going to find you first. But the key is that the MMSI number does not travel with you. It's not like a driver's license. It is forever paired to that boat and those electronics.
So that would not be a heels, but it would work. And we've bought a second radio that will have programmed properly.
Right. I mean, you can still have that old one reprogrammed. Most older radios will let you do it twice. Some you have to ship back to a manufacturer, but usually they will do it for free. You just have to package it up and ship.
Yeah,
Okay.
The manufacturer said that they don't even have the software for it.
There you go. Okay, then that one is too. Sir? Okay.
Does that include the handheld radio?
There are some DSC capable handhelds, not many are. That's kind of an expensive mod, but you can do that. And same deal, the MMSI number is associated with the radio and the boat. And if you sell the boat, you should leave that with the boat. But general, I mean, it's not a bad idea if it's the boat if it's the one you have in your dinghy and you want to be able to call DSC help for the dinghy. Also, another feature is you can enter anybody else's MMSI number, store it into your radio, and you go to change the menu to DSC calling, and you have somebody's number and their boat name, and I can call up, Deb on Southerly on my screen, hit DSC call. Her radio bleeps in an unusual and very distinct way, and she and I are in an encrypted digital two-way phone call that no one else can hear.
So ICOM has a radio that has a built-in GPS, it's a handheld, and AIS built into it.
Oh yeah, no, you can.
$370.
Well, it's coming down. No, it's great. Finally, recommended reading. I've got yes, sir. Sorry.
Yeah, you only get one chance with the AIS to reset it. And then if you can't do that, then you have to pay, say, MTS.
Yes.
To reset it again.
Yeah, locally, the company here, MTS, has the special expensive machine, and they can change the number.
They charge $25.
There you go. Okay. So if you've got a new one, they can reprogram it. The guys around the corner, MTS, they've done work for me too. They do a great job. Yes, sir.
So I have to program both of my VHF radios, right?
But if you want to be able to call for help from both of them, which I think is.
I know I did the bottom, but I'm thinking at the top. As soon as you turn the radio on, if the GPS is being fed in there, you'll see that right away.
You'll see it right on the screen.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
Yep, absolutely. But it will distinctly say usually no position or no GPS will always be on the front opening screen to warn you that it's not connected. Yes, ma'am. Was there a question? Okay, sir. All right. So these are, to me, if you were only going to buy 4 books for navigation, seamanship, it's these 4, and you can stop there. Yes, there are tons of others. There's also the Bible Bowditch. However, I'm a weirdo and I get bored, meaning navigationally, and I get a little bored and bogged down reading Bowditch. It is just so esoteric sometimes. But Chapman's is very readable, has all the information you need. It's not quite as thick as Bowditch, but it's almost as heavy. It's the one stop for everything. If you want to adjust your compass, the instructions are in there. If you want to swing ship and make a compass card, all kinds of weird stuff, it's there. Boat navigation for the rest of us, I would say start here. Amazing book. Coast Guard, recently deceased in 2007, Captain Bill Brogdon, the most intuitive, easy to read and understand book. Even in the Navy, I would start brand new ensigns on the ship, regardless of where they went to college, with that book to kind of get the big picture and intuitive understanding. The illustrations are phenomenal. And then if you're not comfortable tuning your own radar for Mariners is excellent. The book comes with a CD-ROM simulator so you can run radar on your PC and practice with what it looks like on the screen. That's why we anchor out. This is the view in Little Round Bay in the upper Severn River, and a guy who was out fly fishing that morning, and only we and the other sailboat there at anchor were enjoying that because we were anchored. Final thing, we talked briefly about AIS. This is kind of in a backup. If you don't have AIS, then it's handy. It's not absolutely required. There's also the marine tracking app that you can at least receive as long as you got a phone signal where the vessels are. But if you've got AIS, that's me on ship. The gray triangles are other vessels transmitting their position, course, and speed. I'm transmitting my position, course, and speed. If I click on that little gray triangle, then I get all the information about this tugboat, where he's going, his course and speed, etc. And even at great range, if I needed to call him on the radio, I've already got his name, and he can see me for collision avoidance. Of course, AIS is not a panacea because not every vessel has it, but by law, everything over 200 tons is required to have it. It's optional for ours. And that is it. All right, so now, any final questions before I go to a quick live actual tracking demo? And I'm just gonna pull up the Navionics. All right. I think I'm still logged in. Oh yeah, hold on, yeah, sorry, I'm just logging in 1 second. Let me switch my display fast. There we go, okay, good.
Well, Alex, and where we get through now?
All right, I am. All right, I'm trying to toggle view. Can you help me? I'm trying to figure out how to get back on. I'm trying to toggle view here, but I'm not getting.
Yeah, I don't think, maybe, I don't think it's.
Okay, good. All right, okay, good. All right.
Well, part of it is we're supposed to do it every.
Actually, let me do this. That work? Oh. Let me do that. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. Where do we want to go? Any of those destinations from this morning that you want to do a quick? Where? Chester River. All right. Chester River. Lots of turns. So, and again, this is the web version. The functions on the tablet or app version are very, very similar, but this is the web-based only. The menus at the top are slightly different. They're in different locations on the app. So I'm going to go to route. I'm going to do a manual route. And, you know, I've already got my both settings in here of how big I am, etc. And I've plugged in the fast. This is still on the fast route, so when it does calculations, then we're gonna do that. It'll assume that. So let me, whoops, I got big. All right, sorry. Okay, so we're gonna go to Chester River. All right, up in Chestertown. Close this so I can see. And I mean, these, very similar functions. You do not have to have Navionics if you've got, Garmin or Raymarine, or any others. Whoops, I just laid my first waypoint. Then you could certainly, sorry, very sensitive. All right.
Just put it in hand with the Chester River, it'll do it for you automatically.
Yeah, well, you can do auto routing. As I said earlier, am not a fan. So I'm going to do the manual method. You could do auto route and.
I like it to just find where you're going. And then it gives you, it gives you a clue.
Oh yeah, so you don't have to zoom in on it, right.
Yeah.
So here is kind of the final bridge here, and Chestertown proper, I think, is right here. And I guess you're right. If you, and so here's the name of the marinas. So I'll just start it kind of, you'll be in visual range here and you don't want alarms going off. So I'll start, back to route manual. And also you can see it's My Routes Archive has all the stored routes in there. You can do it manually like this, or you can also enter latitude, longitude, and drop in specific waypoints if you want. There's my second waypoint, and I'm literally just dragging and dropping, and we're going to go back and look, but I'm trying to be careful that I'm not cutting any corners, which is also why, I'm going to get a lot of alarms because this is a gentle curve. I'm trying to stay in a pretty narrow channel, so I'm ending up with several extra waypoints there's a point at which in your approach, like right when you arrive at the mouth of the Chester River, you might want to turn off your waypoint arrival alarm, if yours is as painful as mine, because you're going to have so many little tiny short, even that, like it's, look, I just kind of cut that corner a little tight. So I moved this one back, reach back and grab that one, just drag it a little. I don't want to take myself, because if I'm coming in, I'm now unnecessarily hugging the green side and maybe running in the face of some outgoing traffic. So I'm going to pull this guy over a little further. And it's this kind of, I'm fixing my errors as I'm going, but it's that kind of fly along. And you can see, because we're in the river, I'm way zoomed in. And we're passing by points of interest. There's clearly a marina there with fuel. If we needed to plan our fuel stops, we'll get out of the river shortly. This is a somewhat, and I'm maybe a little close there, so I might have to go back in the fly through. I'm not going to obsess on these right now. Looks like I might be able to get a little back. Whoops. Maybe there. There we go. Nice straight shot, so I'm just going to go way off the screen. There we go. Boink. Get into the wider spots. And I'm basically, plotting it down the center of the channel, knowing that when I'm headed to Chestertown, I'm going to stay well right, and when I'm leaving, I'm going to stay well right, regardless of my track being laid dead center. This lets us not have to lay a second track for inbound and outbound. We're almost out of the river. Thank you.
When you do this, is this on your iPad or is this on your chart plotter?
Well, I do both. Now, because I've got the Navionics chip, and I buy Navionics maps or charts for the chip, I can take this route, and the next time I update my chip, if we'll save this route, it'll load into the same chip, so I don't have to re-enter it in my chart plotter. But the same technique, I do the drag and drop on my chart plotter as well.
With Ray Marine?
With Ray Marine, correct.
You can also load it up via Bluetooth directly. You don't have to take the chip out.
Mine is like a 2005 Ray Marine, so I did not have a Bluetooth enabled plotter, but that is awesome. Clearly, they're all getting better all the time, and there's a point at which, and it's typically that 10 to 15 year mark where there's enough improvements to the electronics that it may be time for an electronics upgrade. A Bluetooth chart update sounds awesome. That's great.
Can you insert points in the middle of it?
Yes. I hid the menu, like I just dropped a point in the middle if I wanted to do a little dog leg, and then I hid the menu off to the left side, which would let me, if you wanted to manually type in actual latitude, longitude, you could do it like that. But the beauty of when plotters came along, the ability, I've got to be very careful with this sensitive mouse pad. Now we're way out in center line, point. And again, because I've got safety depth set to display anything dark blue is 6 or less, I know I'm safe to visually safe. I don't have to obsess on, oh wait, am I running anything too shallow? If I didn't have my safety depth set right, then the colors might not be quite as intuitive. I was encouraged to do what appears to be one of the, I've not been to Chestertown, one of the longest and most circuitous voice plane flights. This will end up with almost as many points as going all the way to Cape May. Exactly. No, it's cool. I've always wanted to go to Chestertown, so I'm actually going to save this one and use it. Whoops. Did I? Yeah. Okay. Good. I was just checking green and red for a second there. Holy cow! All right, we're almost there. All right, lean on the left. There we go. And we could certainly cut this corner. I'm going to be obsessive and you know, here, this is the forward and aft range lights of the towers that line up for one of the approaches coming down at Chesapeake. We've got plenty of good water, so I'm not going to honor that red, but I will transit between these two towers, past this red and white safe water mark. And then note that I'm now, for any traffic that is headed north or headed to Baltimore, oh no. Don't go to Chester River, right?
Too many waypoints.
Yeah, but again, we're doing a left-hand turn, and so any traffic coming through, I've like point 37 and 38, I'm still keeping them well clear. 37, maybe even, I might swing even wide if I see, at this tip of land, I frequently have seen fishing traffic, so in execution, we may actually want to really honor that red to avoid the fishing fleet, and that's just a local knowledge thing. I just remembered seeing them clustered around those two towers. All right, so now we're headed down to the Bay Bridge.
You could
And
save miles by going through National Narrows.
Yeah. Or Kent Narrows in that case, yeah. And so now, we're deliberately crossing traffic here. So we've got to kind of make a choice. Do I want to get in the channel? We don't have to honor the channel for depth, but we just need to be aware that we're crossing any northbound traffic here and potentially being overtaken over our starboard side. So that gets me across the main channel. And for the rest of the trip, as we pass, Annapolis is over here, as we head on down the bay, I'm going to stay well clear of the shipping channel, which is over here in the 80, 90 feet water. There we go. And if this was on my chart plotter, I've got existing waypoints that I could just hover over and use this waypoint button, passing by Thomas Point Light. You can certainly go way closer to Thomas Point Light, but there's always lots of fishing boats down here. So just drop one right there, pass by that junction buoy. And then now we're kind of in the home stretch, cutting this corner. And then here's buoy 83 Alpha. So I'm going to honor it before I turn in to Herring Bay. So we're only 45 points, that's not too bad. So I'm going to save that. Doesn't like that, right? I don't know if that's maybe Wi-Fi signal here, or is there really something wrong? Maybe Route 7 is already taken, so let's just make this Chester River. And then, taking route, there we go. All right. Boom. Did we get that? Come on now. So, all right, at least it did the fuel calculation for the, it's 50-mile trip, 3 hours at fast speed, but if I want to save some fuel, then go into boat settings and change it back to 8 knots. And my much better fuel consumption. So now Chester River is a 24-gallon trip at 6 hours at 8 knots. That's not too bad. Honey, let's go to Chester River. Awesome. So that's the plotting piece. Does anybody want to see the windy app usage or currents and tides and currents and all that?
How would you bring up the safe fish traps?
Oh, well, that is, again, that's the challenge of boating in the Chesapeake. The fish traps, there's one right about here, that's number one, and there's one right about here. I'm approximately going in between the two, but that's only because I know where they are. When I convert this to my chart plotter, then it will be visible. But
Is there a way to save it on Navionics? In your account?
No, one thing that Navionics will not do is let you display multiple active routes. And that's the only way I've kind of tricked my my plotter into displaying the pound nets because I built a tiny little, the bigger one is a triangle shaped 3-leg route. I saved it, put some, cute symbols on it, and labeled it Route 1. And my plotter allows me to have multiple routes visible. And so I've got 3 routes. I've got yellow Yacht Club racing buoy because it isn't as bright at night as I would like. I've got it plotted, and I've got the 2 pound nets. But because they're not actually on the chart, and even on this one, like you don't see, maybe at a higher zoom level, do you see?
Oh,
Yeah, you can see the crowdsourced dots now, but whoops, let's delete that waypoint. I, am assuming kind of scattergram. Something's wrong. I'm assuming scattergram math as I had before. That I know is the real one because the buoy's right next to it. This one I'm assuming. I sure hope I'm not wrong, and that one isn't it. But I've got to zoom way in to see those estimates. Query all of them. Somewhat. That's the shallow water symbol. Somebody else's. I bet that cluster is probably it. But that's a great question. It's that's the danger of pound nets is they're not charted. Only their areas of potential availability.
Can you, with Navionics, can you develop something like a master slide, like you would in PowerPoint, where you have some of the navigational aspects?
Right.
And then every time you start a new way up, a new trip, those are already
displayed
embedded in that.
Not in Navionics. Aquamaps is probably better for that, mainly because there's a crowdsourced layer that you can turn on and off, taking it for the value that it might not be if somebody GPS was inaccurate when they plotted it. But the Aquamaps aspect of that, I think, offers some options. Sir.
On Navionics, you can use markers that I use, markers to program where those fishing things are.
Right, that's true. You can enter your own. You can like same deal. It's like if when running Navionics in the boat, because I'd want the position to be spot on.
It's all tied together. You on your chart plotter on your iPad, you can actually program a marker. And
yes.
That marker always shows up every time you open it up. That shows you where.
Correct. I can, in fact, if it would let me save, then I could actually, it won't let me save, but like I could click here and create my own reference point, like all these other people can do, and display my own type of thing. I could choose from their menu of symbols. You're absolutely right. And it would be available if you showed your own waypoints. That's true. Or your own points of interest, I think Navionics calls it. Sir.
The letter C that's in the diamond shape, I think you said that's going to do a current.
It's a current.
How did you get those to show?
They're always on the chart. On Navionics?
Is it only on the web? Yeah, is it only on the web?
No, it's on my app too. I think. Make sure. Yeah, because as I'm steaming by them occasionally. Oh, I'm sorry. When your app is running, the actual data is what shows up on Navionics as the blue or red arrow. Like when you're getting live, like if your phone is connected, right, the live data is always hovering right on top of that symbol. This is just lets you know and of course they're not hazards to navigation, they're very deep, so you can drive right over them and plot right over them. Sir?
Is Navionics going to tell you why you can't save it?
I don't know. Well, no, maybe not.
What do you have to do? Do you have to retrace the whole course? You have to correct them.
Yeah, I think it's saved because it did the distance calculation. It's calculating my fuel. I'm not sure. I mean, I frequently just plot on the boat, but I've never seen that before. I've been.
It could be the internet connection.
Yeah, I've been disconnecting and reconnecting. I've got a remote monitor. I'm in a new location. I'm not sure, but I've never had this problem before.
And you may have touched on this, but just how many different routes can you save?
I have not reached the max. I'm sure I could find that in the instructions, but I mean, I've got. Let me just try and hit cancel here and check my routes archive. I've got. I'm not in full screen. Am I here? Sorry. get big screen. There we go. No, I'm sure I guess my display settings are a little squirrely. You know, these are just places we've planned and done and been to.
So it's a bunch.
Yeah, I mean, I have not ever run out.
I got 50.
Yeah, so, you know, that's where we are. And you see just a quick summary on all these. I mean, that's the one that I use for today's course because I've put the 5 knots in there or 8 knots in there. This is, you know, in a quick summary, it reminds me, and maybe that's kind of a helpful thing. It's like, hey, we can only have time for a day trip. Which one okay, we get Solomon's in 4 hours at 8 knots. We could go to Reedville in 8 hours. That's a separate leg, getting all the way. It's a multi-leg trip that we planned, but have not been to Cape Charles yet. We want to go. I poorly labeled Route 3, wherever that goes to. It's a long way away. Little knowledge management problem here. And then these were when I helped a friend deliver their boat from Long Island, and so these were the legs of Old Saybrook, Connecticut to Atlantic City, and Atlantic City to Herring Bay. Fortunately, we were doing like 20 knots the whole way, so it was much faster than those. They were one-day legs each way. And those, in fact, there's a 4-part lesson called Voyage Planning 101, 02, 03, 04 on the trolleyyachting.com website that catalogs that trip and does what I did in way over 2 hours, today in 4 distinct lessons with tons of extra detail and links and all that stuff in there. So please take a look at those on the website if you want to go a few steps deeper in that. I will put that back up. It's Troll.
Put Aquaman routes in the Navionics.
The question is, can you put Aquamap?
423 routes.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I know they can go into Aquamaps, but not. I don't think about Navionics. Yep.
Is this where you overlay the Corps of Engineers data?
That was from Aquamaps. And let's see if I can get Aquamaps working on, not Aquaman, Aquamaps. And I'm not sure if it does it on the web version. And in fact, I tried this yesterday, and I was doing it on my phone because I couldn't remember my login. So I've got the app, but I mean, maybe I'll do it on Chart Viewer, but without logging in, I'm not sure.
Aquaman is really good.
Yeah, I like Aquaman. I mean, I've been using Navionics for years. I've owned Garmin products in the past, but I'm liking more and more. I think that said that, Garmin bought them and they're a ginormous company, and it wouldn't surprise me if they very quickly start incorporating some. All right, this is going to be too hard. I'm sorry with the map. The world's upside down. I was just going to zoom in and try and get to be able to turn on that. But let me just check and make sure I can even get to that. Like this, yeah, there we go. So U.S. Army Corps of Engineers surveys. You turn them on. Here's on the app. Here we go. Here's the settings. All 3 years, 1.5 years. So I've got it. Normally I run on 1.5 years, and now it's loading all that stuff. So if I can zoom in on Naps Narrows without turning the world upside down, let's see. Yeah, we may have a slow internet connection here. My apologies to go on-spot Wi-Fi because I can't seem to close this little menu. But we're going to get there, I swear. There it is. And also here's where, the Waterway Guide has this partnership with Aquamaps. So all of those marinas and fuel stops and all those kind of things. So now you can see, and note that, they only do areas that they're about to survey. So you start to see these colors appearing. Naps Narrows is clearly modeled. Looks like the approaches to Chesapeake City are modeled. Because they're actively dredging, I think when you zoom way in, you see Poplar Island is modeled, but all right, we're getting there. Sorry, my mouse finger. So this is the screenshot that I took and rotated for how shallow. Got 2 fingers. There we go. And so, holy cow, that's shallow. Look at that. There's a 1.8 right there, right next to the red. Now, the 0.08 is, in theory, inside the channel because it's between the red and the black. So yeah, that just tells me the sands have moved so much that you can no longer even rely on the markers. There we go. I'm trying to close this. All kinds of data popping up here. All right. There we go. So that's Naps Narrows with fresh data, at least a year and a half or less, or more recent, and that's pretty trustworthy. The data's still there if you check on the 1 year thing. And so, sorry? Oh, yeah, so I will not be taking my 4'11" trawler.
Are those soundings in feet or meters?
These are in feet. Yeah, and that's like in the settings of the data, you can make it feet or meters, but this is soundings in feet. And so, of course, not all areas are surveyed. You might have great interest in another approach, but it hasn't been surveyed. Something's happening over here. That's not a heavily occupied area, so somebody paid for the survey, or there's some major construction going on, so that they appear in unusual spots. It looks like there's no help. There's no help in the Chester River. It's like you're not getting any only fresh data that they've actually done. But I do see it here at Harrington North.
On the intercoastal, like a lot of the inlets have changed their lot.
Yep.
The ocean,
Mm-hmm.
they have.
That's true. If you go down the intercoastal, you see a lot of color, but be very careful. Like if you toggle it back to 1 year, it all goes away. And so if you put it on 3 years, some of those inlets were surveyed 3 or 4 years ago. They might have been, sometimes they drop the data because they then did the dredging. Like here's the survey for the dredging of the approaches here to Harrington North. I don't know, is that dredging done yet? Did they finish that? Or is that?
They're going to dredge this year, aren't they?
Or is it this year's dredging? So
I haven't really been involved.
I think it's this year, yeah. Yep.
I
So
was told they're going to go from the inlet all the way to the bridges.
so it's fresh data, but that is also why I only come over
So
here.
that's gotta be.
I
That's
don't,
meters.
I,
Somehow you've got to switch to meters there.
oh, maybe this is meters. Yeah, there's no way we have 2 feet. Yeah, all right.
That's why I thought I'd seen that.
When we ran a grant, if I had gotten the updated.
Yeah, hold on.
Because the updated data showed. Right. The previous iteration, I had that one.
Get some money. Oh, thank you. You're right. There we go. It's still pretty hairy. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
there we go. All right, so yeah, here's our approaches, and
Does it give you a time when that data was taken?
I think we can probably we can go back to, we can turn off. I mean, this one I know they surveyed pretty recently, just because, but we can check USA's data and go back to months close. I think you can choose how many. It's 3 months old? No, 4 months, 5 months.
Wasn't in the last one.
Definitely not. There we go. So it's
8 months.
8 months ago is when it turned on. Yep, 7 to 8 months. So it turns on at 8. So that's 8 months ago, which, we don't have a lot of current in and out of here, but that's as of 8 months ago. You got a few little, basically you need to, no kidding, stay dead center.
It does get shallow most of the time.
Yep, oh, yeah. No, it's a little hairy. And even that,
Maybe out there.
I mean, the bar is some of the shallowest stuff. It's orange, you know. All right.